ready to begin our panel discussion and the webinar. So I please request Professor S.K. Satish, the Director of Future Earth South Asia, to welcome everybody.
Thank you. Good afternoon. A warm welcome to panel discussion and the third webinar on the transforming food systems in South Asia, finding best strategy, policies and practices in tackling hunger and malnutrition, organized by the Future Earth South Asia Global Hub, hosted by Devesh Center for Climate Change at Indian Institute of Science. So first of all, I welcome Dr. Ayyappan, who will be chairing the panel discussion and the session. And I also welcome all 8 speakers from South Asia and all the participants who have joined this webinar today. I hope that this webinar will be very productive and contribute towards a growing network of scientists, researchers, practitioners, and decision makers in South Asia region. I now request Dr. Facknath, Deputy Director for South Asia Global Hub, to share the webinar agenda and the current and future programs of Future of South Asia Global Hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Satish. I extend the welcome further to all our panelists for today's session and the speakers for today's webinar. And also I welcome the other panelists who are speaking at other webinars. So with that, let me quickly, because some of you were not present for the opening when we had it day before. So let me take you through the agenda. So what we are going to have today is a panel discussion, followed by deliberation by the speakers. And the webinar is the third in the series on transforming food system in South Asia. Quickly about Future Earth. We are a platform where we host and convene various meetings. We bring in scientists, collaborators, stakeholders, practitioners, politicians from all fields so that we can advance science and knowledge. So knowledge advancement is one of a major objective of Future Earth. We operate through various distributed secretariat, the one for South Asia being here in the Devesh Center for Climate Change at Indian Institute of Science. Along with that, we have 9 other global secretariat hubs and also various global research programs and networks of scientists. So at the Future Earth South Asia Global Hub, what we are focusing on are the webinar series that have been designed and you are a part of it today. So the 4 major themes, what we have prioritized are food security, looking into malnutrition and to see how South Asia can advance as a better nation. Then we have health sensitization program so that we are able to spread awareness for pollution related to food, water, and also air. And we're also looking into the risk faced by the communities living in the coast due to sea level rise and also the change in climate and also denudation of land. So people we work with or the stakeholders and our partners are spread across SAARC countries, Myanmar and Indian Island Ocean countries. The way we want to move forward is through webinar engagement, as you can see in our chart here. So what we are having today are those 5 webinar series, which will be followed by a working committee workshop very soon in the Indian Institute of Science, and also culminating finally into a regional summit by the end of maybe December 2023 or December 2022 or February 2023, where we are planning to bring out a deliberation and a statement on a call for action as to what needs to be done and how do we accelerate our objectives, how do we accelerate our efforts towards attaining our sustainable development goals and the goals by 2030, because we are just 7.5 years away. So the big question there. And what we're also looking into 2 things, the SDGs as our targets, and also the Paris Agreement's 2 degrees Celsius as a threshold beyond which it will be impossible to reverse. I'm glad to introduce all our coordinators that you see here. And the coordinator for today's webinar is Gargi, who will be taking the session a little later, along with Dr. Ayyappan. So these were the webinars for many who are new and also to the panelists. These are the webinars we have been conducting. So the first and the second is over. We're looking forward to the 3, 4, and 5, the 3 on food, the 4th on the health sensitization, and the 5th on sustainable communities, where we plan to have on-ground pilot programs in India. So also want to introduce all the speakers of the rest of the webinars, including Dr. Andreas, Professor Andreas, who was a chair for day before's webinar. Very happy to introduce Dr. Ayyappan, who is the chair of Karnataka State and Technology Academy. He's also the VC of Agriculture University in Imphal. He's Padma Shri, and he's known for his work on aquaculture and fisheries. So that's Dr. Ayyappan, who'll be chairing the session today. Then we have Dr. Parmesh, who'll be chairing it for the health part. And for the webinar on sustainable communities, we have Mr. P.T. Rai, Professor Montemani, Devika Zinat, and Satya, who'll be chairing it for the respective sessions. That will be on 26th, 27th, and 29th of April. And I also welcome all of you to join us again. So with that, I will end, and I will call Gargi to moderate the session and also introduce all the speakers and the chair. So with that, we will now begin our webinar series 3.
We have a third webinar in the series today for transforming food systems in South Asia, finding best strategy, policies, and practices in tackling hunger and malnutrition. We have 8 speakers with us today, and there's going to be a panel discussion here, the chair of which will be Dr. S. Ayyappan, who's also here with us. First, I'll introduce Ayyappan, sir. He is the Chancellor of Central Agriculture University, Imphal, and the Chairman of Karnataka Science and Technology Academy. An eminent scientist, Dr. Ayyappan has previously served as the Director General of Indian Council of Agriculture Research and Secretary, Department of Agriculture Research and Education. In 2022, Dr. Ayyappan was conferred the Padma Shri Award for his distinguished service in the field of science and engineering. The award is in recognition of his service as a respected aquaculture scientist, playing a key role in powering India's Blue Revolution. Prior to his present assignment as the Secretary, DARE and DG ICAR, he served as the Deputy Director General, Fisheries, Director, Central Institute of Fisheries Education, Mumbai, Director, Central Institute of Freshwater Aquaculture, Bhubaneswar, and Scientist, Central Inland Fisheries Research Institute, Barakpur, in the ICAR system, and has made significant research contributions to the National Agriculture Research System. Welcome, sir. I'll now be introducing all the speakers. So the first speaker here with us today is Professor Sunita Facknath, who is the Professor in Sustainable Agriculture at the University of Mauritius and was the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture from 2015 to 2018. She has expertise in the field of sustainable agriculture, indigenous knowledge systems, and climate change, and has also worked in the areas of aquaculture and sustainable forestry. Professor Facknath has completed several consultancies for regional and international bodies, as well as for the government of Mauritius and local private companies. The second speaker with us today is Dr. W.A.R.T. Wickramaarachchi, who is a senior bureaucrat in the agriculture system in Sri Lanka and is currently the director of the National Plant Quarantine Service of the Department of Agriculture. He has more than 25 years of working experience in many areas of the country, as well as in other South Asian countries, such as Bangladesh and India, by serving as Sri Lanka's official representative to SAARC Agriculture Office. The third speaker with us today is Ms. Lama, who is the Director of Operations and Strategy at Bhutan Ecological Society, an environment non-profit in Bhutan. In her current position, she works to improve both environmental and human welfare through research and action. She has several years of experience in development research and project management and coordination in Bhutan. She has worked at the Asian Development Bank, International Institute for Sustainable Development, Secretariat for the New Development Paradigm, and the Bhutan Foundation in areas of economic development, sustainable consumption and production, societal well-being, and gross national happiness. She graduated with an MBA from Aarhus Business School in Denmark and a BA in Economics and International Relations from Tufts University in the United States. The next speaker with us today is Dr. Prajal Pradhan. He has studied agriculture, engineering, and environmental management and was the lead author of the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change and Land and a contributing author of the AR6 IPCC Working Group 3 report and the AR6 IPCC Working Group 2 report. He has experience in developing relevant research on climate change and sustainable food systems. He's an expert in food system emissions, food security, climate change, and sustainable development goals. Currently, he is the PI of Bioclimapaths and for him SDG projects. His current research focuses on understanding urban transformations, investigating impacts of climate change on bioeconomy, and identifying interlinkages between bioeconomy and SDGs. The next speaker with us today is Dr. Ohnmar Khaing, who holds an associate's degree, Agriculture Development and Rural Planning from Colin University, a master's degree from Yenzin Agriculture University, and a PhD of Philosophy from Kasetsart University. She has worked as an independent consultant for UNEP and UNDP. She worked for the Australian Centre for International Agriculture Research, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade as a program manager in Myanmar. She has 25 years of professional experience in food security, agricultural development, and rural livelihoods, with a special focus on science policy interface, project design, development, and management, capacity training, and raising of public awareness. The next speaker with us today is Dr. Devish Roy, who is a senior research fellow with International Food Policy Research Institute, office in New Delhi. He earned his PhD from University of Maryland, College Park, specializing in international trade. Prior to that, he earned his master's degree from Delhi School of Economics. His main area of research is agricultural markets and trade in agricultural products, where he focuses on the issues related to food safety. He's also engaged in research involving economic analysis of antimicrobial resistance. He has published several journal articles in the areas of international trade and domestic agriculture markets. Apart from research work, he's actively engaged in capacity strengthening, taking classes on issues and methods for young researchers, and he has conducted training particularly on empirical trade analysis, food safety assessment, and impact evaluation. The next speaker with us today is Dr. Janaki Boone, who is a food scientist and nutritionist with many years of research experience at the Industrial Technology Institute under the Ministry of Science and Technology, Sri Lanka. She plays an advisory role on food applications and formulations, assists in developing food standards, and helps in regulatory matters, providing guidance to both government and private sector organizations. She has closely worked with India, Japan, China, and United Kingdom on food-related research projects that have added value to a number of local food commodities. The next speaker with us today is Dr. Suresh Pal, who has a PhD in agricultural economics from ICAR, Indian Agriculture Research Institute, New Delhi. Before joining ICAR National Institute for Agriculture Economics and Policy Research in 2016, he was a member Commission for Agriculture Costs and Prices and Head Division of Agricultural Economics, ICAR, Indian Agriculture Research Institute. Dr. Pal has more than 30 years of experience and made significant contributions to the advancement of research and teaching in the area of agricultural development and policy. I welcome all of our speakers today, and now I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Ayyappan for chairing the panel.
Good morning to everyone, wherever we are located. The outset greetings from the Future Earth Global Hub South Asia, Professor S.K. Satish, Director of the South Asian Global Hub Future Earth, Dr. Smriti Basnet, the Deputy Director, Dr. Gargi Rana, Policy Advisor and Coordinator. And now we have very esteemed speakers, invitees this afternoon, as was already introduced. Dr. Sunita Facknath from Mauritius, Dr. Wickramaarachchi from Sri Lanka, Dr. Lama from Bhutan, Dr. Prajal Pradhan from Nepal, presently Germany, Dr. Suresh Pal, my colleague from New Delhi, not sure if he's here, Dr. Ohnmar Khaing from Myanmar, Dr. Devish Roy from the IFPRI at New Delhi, India, Dr. Janaki Boone from Sri Lanka. To all of you, a very warm welcome and grateful to the Future Earth, the global hub in South Asia, that they have been able to bring all of us together. And in a series of 5 webinars, we are in this particular seminar of webinar 3 on the food production systems. They are transforming the food systems in South Asia. I mean, these are the key words. And how are we going to formulate the strategy, the policy and practices for hunger and tackling hunger and malnutrition. And very esteemed speakers, esteemed panelists, as was already introduced, with lifetime experiences with you, working in different institutions, working in different segments of food production, from production to consumption to regulatory aspects and all that goes along in food production systems. So we are very happy to be together, and I'm sure this will be another learning experience for all of us, hearing to each other, how we are addressing issues in different countries in South Asia. That makes it a very exciting session. I won't take much time except to say that, as already was mentioned, we are looking at SDGs 2, particularly the hunger and malnutrition. We are also looking at associated sustainable development goals, as was already put before you. So related ones, whether with regard to water, sanitation, and all that go along with a wholesome food and nutrition security, maybe 12, 3, 6, 11, and 13. So with your background experiences in different situations across countries in South Asia, we look forward to a very engaging session this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're located. And I'd like to once again thank, and as well thank the Future Earth Global Hub South Asia. And I also see Mr. Dr. Paras Kumar from Pokhran, and I would also at this time greet the panel chairs of all the other panels and other audience, our colleagues, participants, and I'm sure all of us are together here in our efforts to address hunger and malnutrition. With these words, you are aware that we have two parts of the in this particular meeting. From now, we have a panel discussion, and then with a 10-minute break, we go to individual talks. And then for the panel, it has been listed in an alphabetical order. I'm sure all of us would agree. And then when it goes to the talks, it's starting with Madam Dr. Sunita Facknath. I mean, that I'm sure you all have the program. Again, we'll come back. Now, the panel discussion is in the series in this order of Dr. Pem Lama, starting with Pem Lama. It's in the alphabetical order. Dr. Pem Lama from Bhutan, then Dr. Devish Roy from India, then Dr. Suresh Pal from India, if he is present, and then Dr. Sunita Facknath, Mauritius, Dr. Ohnmar Khaing, Myanmar, Dr. Prajal Pradhan from Nepal, Germany, Dr. Wickramaarachchi from Sri Lanka, and Dr. Madam Gunaratne from Sri Lanka. And as already has been mentioned in the program, there are two questions for each of the panelists, and that will take us around all the panelists with regard to each of those questions. And I'm sure we have that kind of a time, about 2.5 minutes for each panelist, and for the first question. So, Dr. Gargi, so would you like to start with the first question, which says basically, it says, with regard to food policy interventions, how do we reshape to empower the disadvantaged groups and make our food systems more resilient, particularly in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic? This is the question. So, as I said, we'll go around all the panelists if you kindly agree. We take about 2 to 2.5 minutes, and then we move on to the next speaker. Are we fine with that? Any speaker would like to say anything at this stage? Any panelists would like to make any opening remarks? Any remarks, suggestions, or can we go through the agenda as has been listed? Is it okay? So in that case, we start with the panel discussion. This question first to Dr. Pem Lama from Bhutan. Please put on your mic and kindly take the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ayyappan, for the introduction. But I think with due respect to everyone who actually are doctors, I'm not one yet. But I do work at the Bhutan Ecological Society and have done some work related to food systems, and mostly my work, I work with livelihoods as well as the environment. So happy to be among the esteemed panelists here. In response to the question that's posed, how do we reshape food policy? I mean, I think in my presentation later on, I can hopefully expand on it a little bit, but in interest of time, I think what I can say is that Bhutan is a very small country. It's a landlocked country. And so food self-sufficiency and sustainability is actually quite a big issue. It's an even greater issue because Bhutan's topographically not very well suited for growing a lot of things. We have steep slopes, and I think people from Nepal and other mountainous regions can appreciate how difficult farming is. So I think on the one hand, we have a lot of also rural population as a developing country. So there are a lot of people that are engaged in agriculture and farming, but at the same time, they're not doing it at a commercial level, which is able to feed the people. So I think the challenge is, number one is in terms of just, how do you ensure livelihoods and inclusive development for rural Bhutanese? And then at the other end of the spectrum, I think the challenge is also how do you keep feeding people? And especially, I think it's relevant in the wake of COVID pandemic. Bhutan adopted a very strict sort of restrictions and lockdown policies, which meant that a lot of the food imports, which Bhutan imports most of the food, mostly from India, but also from other neighboring countries. So a lot of the food imports were all stopped because of our very harsh and strong COVID policies. So on the one hand, again, like we have over-reliance on imports, but on the other hand, we also don't have enough to feed the population. So I think this presents a very interesting challenge for Bhutan to be very efficient and effective in sort of the farming policies and trying to bring sort of match this philosophy of rural development with also food policy, and again, also reaching the food to Bhutanese. So in that, I think again, like I'll elaborate this in my presentation later, but the three things that I can say that are very important moving forward for Bhutan. Number one is just improving and investing in infrastructure. And this relates to road, electricity, a lot of infrastructure in rural areas so that rural people actually stay in those areas and continue farming. But it also specifically relates to infrastructure related to agriculture. For example, we have very poor cold storage facilities, warehouses, and a lot of logistics are lacking to bring the food to the market. So I think infrastructure investment is one important one. The other one I think that's very important is that Bhutan is made up of 99% of smallholder farmers. So I think a policy to really help smallholder farmers farm at a scale that is actually, it contributes to their livelihood is very important. And some of the strategies that are really that are required are mostly to develop their capacity and their knowledge in like innovative farming methods, because they're still kind of stuck in 20, 30 years ago how we used to farm using very low technology. So how do you support rural farmers to actually grow the food that we need? I think that's an important one. And the third one is, I think, at the other end of the spectrum, which is about promoting local, promoting healthy food, because when we talk about health and nutrition, especially, I mean, Bhutan is good that we don't have so much hunger issues, but then I think nutrition becomes an issue. There's a lot of lifestyle diseases coming up now. So I think promoting healthy diets, promoting local diets, and kind of diversity in food would be important. So I'll leave it at that. I hope I didn't take more than enough time, and look forward to my presentation to elaborate on some of the points. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lama, for this initial remarks and the panel inputs. Over to Dr. Devish Roy from India.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Ayyappan. This is, I'm just, the way I've been looking at, we have been discussing a lot on how the food systems are going to transform post COVID-19 pandemic. But my submission is more general from that perspective, which is, dealing with any shock. This not only related to COVID shock. And the essential idea that I really want to propose is that you just, want to summarize that what we think about from point of view of restructuring the food system generally is trying to, and particularly from the point of India, is basically getting the markets right. I mean, we really do, the biggest problem in India from a food system perspective is the agriculture market. I mean, and toward that, I probably would like to say that, India probably has this lethal combination of, because of our history of trying to be self-reliant in everything. Like, for instance, it's kind of very hard to convince people. I work a lot on pulses, and I don't think that India has comparative advantage in pulses. So there's no reason for India to be, it's not the food foreign exchange situation that was there in 60s and 70s. There, if you spend all your foreign exchange, you could only buy 6% of your grains or your food. But now if you use kind of 6% of your foreign exchange, you can buy all the grains in the world, right? So, so India doesn't have now same thing in oilseeds. If you see the composition effect, I mean, recently India announced kind of a mission for palm oil, and for a nutrition perspective, palm oil is a little scary, right? You just probably don't want to get in there. And so the idea is you have to get the markets right, and we always try to focus on self-sufficiency and not being open to trade. And India always had this heterodox opening that you open on export side but close on the import side. But now how the trade happens, how the is basically that you have to open on both sides, and leaving aside even the globalized value chain, the way they are emerging. But even from a very political economy perspective, that if you're going to just open up on the export side and we close on the import side.
Dr. Roy, okay, thank you. I think you can take more time when you have your session talk. Thank you very much, Dr. Roy, for these inputs. I request at this stage all the panelists to take only about 2 minutes. We're already behind time. I believe Dr. Suresh Pal, Director of the National Institute of Agricultural Policy, is not here at this time. Now over to Dr. Sunita Facknath from Mauritius. About 2 minutes, madam. You can kindly unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Sorry about that. What I was saying that what we have seen during this COVID pandemic was that in most of the world, governments and financial institutions have responded with really rapid speed to the situation. It was an emergency situation. It warranted a crisis management response, and most governments rose to the occasion. In most cases, it was a direct cash-based aid response, with stimulus packages to companies, emergency financing to people, and so on. That was fine. That was a need of the hour. But now we are 2 years down the line, and given that the virus is not likely to go away, the situation is not going to turn around much, we need to have a more systems approach to food and nutrition security. So we should include policies and actions not only for national and household food security, but also for social protection, for health systems, for environmental protection, for capacity building for individuals, and community empowerment. Also, these interventions should go beyond policy to actual practical support for the disadvantaged across the different dimensions of food systems. So it should be at the heart of social protection programs to protect against not only pandemics like this one, but also for reduction in agriculture production due to climate change and other drivers, breakdown of food markets, and so on. We also need to put, we also need to put the needs of women at the forefront, because as we know, women play a key role in household and essential services. They're also primary caregivers and frontline in healthcare.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Ohnmar Khaing from Myanmar. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it is a very different situation in Myanmar right now to reshape the policy interventions for that. But I think after the pandemic, but during still in the consequences, and also double up struggle with the coup. So we're still in the emergency situation of food assistance in many places across the states and region. And I think this is very much important to reshape the policy of the emergency stage, as Ms. Sunita already mentioned. And the other thing is, I already agree with the other panelists, also to have a consideration of resilient climate adaptation strategy to integrate into the policy there to build the community to against the resilience of the climate change adaptation program. So in the perspective of Myanmar, this is very much early stage of the transformation. So I mean, we have to really reflect on the ground level of the policy intervention. So this is really much, the emergency and also the midterm consideration and also longer sustainable consideration. So these are the mixed approach we have to integrate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kang. Over to Dr. Prajal Pradhan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is really essential question. Before pandemic also, we have to realize that our food systems is broken. And there are solutions to fix this broken food system. Yeah, Lama already explained few of those. I would like to highlight 3 things. Promoting sustainable and healthy diets. That's quite crucial across all the world region. I will elaborate that a bit more in my presentation later on. We have to reconnect producer and consumers because consumers doesn't know how their food is produced and most of the producer doesn't know who is consuming their food. So we need to talk about connecting producer and consumers, and a way forward would be to regionalize our food system as much as possible, not to based on global market or globalized food system. I'm going a bit of different line than Devish Roy at the moment. So we may have an interesting discussion later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pradhan, for the smart remarks at the beginning. May we move to Dr. Wickramaarachchi, Doctor from Sri Lanka. 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Actually, we took the COVID-19 pandemic in the Sri Lankan system. Smallest affected in there all the supply mechanism. Was there's the movement restriction. Well, then people become panic during this period and try to accumulate as much as possible food in their home. Then actually we have that kind of the fluctuation in the price action area, low price, and the other end, the high prices have been experienced. And the one thing actually introduced, the e-commerce, the activities have been introduced into Sri Lanka, but it is the actually added advantage because of this one. That it has been related to the many vendors as well as small the shop vendors, the market. They actually regulation also came up with this one because of the issues with the political as well as financial issues. Regulation made a trade that affect the in-country prices as well as available some of the staple food, like because some of the main grain legumes the much level depend on the imports. Therefore,
thank you. Dr. Wickramaarachchi. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you in your second round and the talk. Thank you. Over to Dr. Gunaratne, please. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. In addition to what was told, presented by Dr. Wickramaarachchi, I would like to add, during the COVID times, we had some the breakdown in the supply chain management system. And this caused quite a bit of panic in the urban areas because there was no movement of foods to the urban areas. But far and beyond that, I think for long years, we have not addressed the problem of post-harvest losses. And it became really a very serious factor at this crucial time because we did not have the infrastructure facilities, as already mentioned by in Bhutan also, to store the food at different levels. So temperature control storage facilities to reduce food losses is, I think, a must for countries like Sri Lanka. And also, I must tell you something positive about what happened during the COVID time, because I did a survey after COVID. Whatever, because there was no supply chain management system, the food that was produced locally in the rural areas remained with them. So they did not go into very stress period, just like the urban areas where the food security was concerned. Even inland fishing went on and they had their food. So thank you very much.
Madam, thank you very much for these remarks. Now we move on to the second question. And I would request everyone to take it 1 minute, 1 minute, we'll come back again. And sir, we have time for discussions also. Now the second question, Dr. Gargi, can put it on the slide. The second question is basically, what are the best ways for evidence-based nutrition action approach that can be integrated with food policies? That's the question to address malnutrition. So what are the best ways for nutrition action that can be integrated into our policies? So we again go back in the same manner. Dr. Lama from Bhutan. 1 minute, please.
Yes, I think in interest of time, I'll keep this short. I think what I believe Dr. Sunita just said earlier about taking a systems approach is very important. So although we can talk about food policies and hunger and malnutrition, but I think at the end of the day, taking a systems approach is very important because everything is interrelated. That's what we are finding out, I think, very, very much so with COVID, and also identifying entry points. And one example that I can cite from Bhutan is the school meal programs, where, especially in terms of tackling micronutrient deficiency and malnutrition in school children, through the school programs where rural children who are in boarding schools are provided food through like centralized education system. So that was one way of delivering that. But I think as a general comment to the question, taking a systems approach is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Devish Roy from IFPRI.
Yeah, so no, I just will just give it in a minute. Actually, for this approach, what I think that what is important that is to look at the situation in India, which is a triple burden of malnutrition, where you have basically the calorie deficiency, but then micronutrient deficiency, and then you also have the issue of obesity and overweight. So an approach which actually takes into account all this triple burden of malnutrition, which looks at food desert as well as nutrient desert. I mean, and that would be the empirical approach in order to look at the issue of addressing the issue of malnutrition in poverty.
Thank you. Dr. Sunita Facknath.
I think we need to integrate nutrition in one of two ways. Either we can incorporate nutrition as a cross-cutting lens in all the national sectoral plans to ensure that it's essentially nutrition specific or nutrition sensitive at least, and it comes across all the different sectors. So once again, as I said, the systems approach. The second way would be to have a separate focus on nutrition action. But then this would have to have close coordination with all the other sectors. But whichever way we go, I think what is very important is that the cost of improved nutrition should be considered as an investment for the future, investment in the future health and economic benefits for the country, and not as a burden on government spending. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Over to Dr. Ohnmar, Myanmar.
Hello. Yes, my consideration is to engage with the private sector. For example, like promoting the fortified, food production. This is really supported to the community for the end-to-end market procedures, such as the rice, fortified rice production, also together with the home gardening program, mushroom production, so that this also can add value to the product. Also, women can have the job, and also the family food security as well as community food security, then can mix up and integrate into the regional and national policy intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Pradhan.
Yeah, I agree with most of the speaker already. Yeah, so but I would like to emphasize one point. Whenever we are talking about malnourishment, we have to think about all the three forms of malnourishment, because sometimes you are only talking about undernourishment and subsidizing, let's say, rice, wheat, sugar, yeah, which might not be good, yeah, because that's also the cause of overconsumption or hidden hunger. So we have to think on a broader sense. So let's talk about malnourishment in all three forms, not only about undernourishment.
Very good, thank you so much. We move on to Dr. Wickramaarachchi.
Yes, actually, I see this one actually have information and the fact centers with us by different national and international organization, but awareness is the main issue in this matter. But we have to make it is as a government policy to where in home to home, especially the female partner of family, because she make she take decision on what to prepare, how to prepare everything. For my concern is the awareness that we promoted throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Over to Dr. Gunaratne.
Yes, Chairperson, what my view is that we have marginalized villages, and we have to use the right tools like diet diversity, food consumption score, and these methods to get get a good idea of the population who really needs, who has the problem in food security. And also, as said by Dr. Wickramaarachchi, mothers' education and mothers also mentioned by someone else about the mothers being into the economic, put her into an economic path would definitely improve the food security within the household. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all your insights for both these two questions. Now, this gives us good time for discussions, and this time I would invite our participants, audience, and anybody in the screen in the group for your questions, remarks, whatever you would like to say at this time. If you have a question, please tell whom you are addressing the question to, and kindly introduce yourself, and then kindly raise the question. It's open for discussions now. For the audience, please.
So we have actually received questions from the audience. I've put them up on a slide. I'll share my screen. So they were not directed to any one panelist, but whoever wants to take it up can take it.
Sure. Kindly go on.
This is the first question that has come up. I'll just read it once. What role do humanitarian agencies have in supporting the strengthening of food systems across the humanitarian development nexus? And how is this reflected in terms of implementation of interventions at country level? Now, whichever panelist wants to take it up can.
Thank you. So, any of you would like to answer this? Kindly raise your hands, and would you like to say anything on this? Any of our esteemed panelists? Dr. Khaing from Myanmar.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of recent situation we are facing right now in Myanmar, I think this is very important that, humanitarian development organizations or partners, agencies really need to have an emergency phase of assisting food assistance first. Then also, they can also use the cash for work or cash for something to give the incentive of the laborers who are jobless, and as well as who are in need of the income. So I mean, this is the first and foremost phase that we have to support to the community with the food assistance and also cash for food. Okay, what can be impacted advantages for the further later stages? This is all because of the emergency need of the food right now in the community, for particularly for the vulnerable people in the UR area. So I mean, this kind of assistance will help them to move forward to the monsoon cultivation, which is really very at the corner of our country to produce rice and also other beans and pulses and something like that. So I think this is really the initial or stimulus package to support to the later production and also the till the harvest system. So this also can also relieve their debt and also their credit in their hand. So I think this is my first thought of the assistance for the development agencies in the food and nutrition system. This also include the other nutrition materials and also safety materials, wash programs, something like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other panelists would like to answer this question? Any other hands going up?
Yes, Chair, may I?
Yeah, Dr. Facknath, Sunita, please.
Yes, I agree with my fellow panelist. This is absolutely the first call, the first action that we need in case of any crisis, any emergency. And we're seeing a lot of emergencies at the moment, whether it's a pandemic, climate change, or floods and earthquakes and so on. But after that, after the first action, I think we need to think in terms of making people more self-reliant, more independent in actually food security issue. Well, in everything actually, but more in food security issues. As the saying goes, give a man a fish for one day and he eats, but you teach him fishing and he can feed his family forever. So humanitarian aid is fine as a first line of action, but then this should be followed up with reskilling, retraining, relocating people if they need be, and helping to get them self-reliant. Thank you. That's what.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other
So
colleague?
can I add something?
Yeah, Dr. Roy, please.
So,
Dr. Devish Roy.
Yeah. No, so I just was trying to refer to one of the studies that IFPRI has conducted regarding this issue, which is about what would it take for the donor community, for the governments, including in the recipient countries, that for ending hunger, increasing income, and protecting the climate. And so just these are, I'm not a CG modeler. I don't really like CG modeling, to be honest, to the large extent, but these are very indicative for the numbers. So it takes about that they need to really double the commitment in order for meeting the target by 2030, which is you can end hunger, you can increase the income of the smallholders, and you can protect the climate. And these are all these things that need to be done. So it requires about, just as a number, it requires about $12 billion more if you want to do that. And these are the estimates that IFPRI has done with different agencies on trying to what would it take in terms of financial resources in order to meet this target by 2030.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, for that round. If we have other questions from our colleagues, audience, participants, any other questions that you would like to raise? Dr. Pradhan has raised a point. Would you like to say something, Dr. Pradhan? Yes, Dr. Pradhan.
Yeah, there is a question on I saw there is a question there, like from Subhas, and it says like actually there is a need to study the relationship between trade-off between food system and agriculture system. And I think it is really a valid point, because so far, like mostly or traditionally, we are mostly focusing on agricultural system or agriculture food production system, to producing more food more efficiently or efficient food production. But across time, we realize that efficient agricultural efficiency or increasing agricultural efficiency may not means increasing food system efficiencies. These two things are different. So instead of talking agriculture system is a part of food system, so we have to think more as a food system as a whole, not as like increasing agriculture or optimizing agricultural system, but we have to think more of optimizing the food system as a whole. And I will come back in my presentation a bit about food system.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Pradhan. I saw Dr. Parmesh. Any point from Dr. Parmesh or any other colleagues at this time? Parmesh, would you like to say something? Yeah. Yeah. Any comments, remarks?
So there is another question.
Please unmute Dr. Parmesh. He's speaking. Please unmute him.
Dr. Parmesh, please.
Yes, sir. I do appreciate each one of the panelists. They put it a wonderful way. While talking only not only undernutrition, malnutrition has to be taken into consideration. And also the Indian adage says, whoever knows what to eat, when to eat, how to eat, he don't get into the disease. And whoever is the father of the nutrition disease, bad nutrition is the mother of the disease. Keeping that one, and also agriculture is not to only focus on the food production, and also food production from various other sources. In future, you have to think of the ocean agriculture for the future. And I think wider sense, you have to look for it, focusing only on the agriculture for production of food. I think our colleague from Nepal, what he said, I totally agree with him. We should do wider vision, and nutrition, yes, is one of the part of it. Is all right. So I thank for giving me this opportunity to speak few words. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Parmesh.
There is another question in the...
Gargi, coming. Thank you, Dr. Parmesh, for this remark coming from a medical doctor, I believe. Thank you very much. Yeah, over to Dr. Gargi.
So it's just Gargi. I was saying that there's another question that an audience member has sent away. I'll just share the screen. This is the question. Studies have shown that poor sanitation is one of the main reasons for malnutrition. Hence, it's important to link sanitation and agriculture to tackle food security issues. Any comments on this by Girija R?
Thank you. Any of our panelists would like to take on this question? Any of the panelists? Yeah. Any hands going up? Okay. Thank you very much. In that case, very valid question. As Dr. Parmesh also said, let me mention at this stage, when we talked of agriculture, it was mainly production agriculture. And we went emphasized only on production aspect. And there again, the FAO definition, agriculture is all forms of food production, terrestrial or aquatic. But most of us, when we talk about agriculture, we only bring up this point of food grains. Food grains, very important, cereals, pulses, oil seeds, and so on. But don't forget fruits, vegetables, milk, meat, fish, egg. So I would suggest, because particularly when we are talking of malnutrition, it is the protein, the micronutrients, the other things that go along with. So the sources of these have to come from different natural systems. So when we talk of food production systems, it should be holistic, from grain to whatever I said, meat, fish, egg, and so on. So that's why we keep talking about food production. In any country, I always tell the media that please talk of the total food that we are producing. Otherwise, we couldn't have sustained the kind of populations we have. So that is one point. Second point is, we, as Parmesh mentioned in the present question, yes, agriculture has to be a continuum. Agriculture to food, to nutrition, to health, to environment and employment. This is the entire paradigm that we talk about. We want the food production systems to be resilient, to be appreciated, and to be partnered with, because food is everybody's business. It's not just the agriculturists or the farmers, it's the medical doctors. Because in this webinar series, fortunately, we have all this. Now, this question says sanitation. Definitely, poor sanitation, the incidence of diseases, and then related malnutrition. Now, we go to rural areas, we look at the nutrient deficiencies, the iron, it would be vitamin A and so on. No, so absolutely agriculture has to be addressed in a holistic manner, not just the production aspect, it's the entire gamut. That's why I said environment. So at this stage, we have Dr. Kia from Myanmar raising her hand. Dr. Kia, please.
Thank you. Just would like to add that I totally agree with you, Mr. Shah, because of, the sanitation is really problematic in our, for example, in my country because of, the harvesting handling and also post-harvest handling, as well as, packaging technology. Everything need to come up with the standard because if we don't follow up with the, good, the handling process and also agricultural practices, the whatever standard, if the consumers, will not wear shoes now, consumers are really, improving their knowledge and education level or understanding this food safety. So I think this is important to follow with the standard. So this is coming from the production level to the, the end user of the produce or product at the market or export level or somewhere. So I think this is pretty much connected with the nutrition, the sanitation and agriculture. It's very much important that to level up the quality of our food produce or value-added product, the alongside of the value chain. This is very much important, the careful awareness and also follow up the standardization to get the quality of the specific produce. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Any other comments from our esteemed panelists? Anybody else would like to say anything? Anyone? At this stage, it's open to everybody. You want to say something before we wind up the panel discussion? Because I have a few points at the end. Any comments from anyone?
Yes,
Please go on. Please go on.
I would, of course, I agree. I mean, there's nothing to disagree about it. I would like to add that there is this One Health concept, One Health approach that has been advocated, which looks at all aspects of human health. So that includes the sanitation, it includes food security, food safety, even insect-borne and waterborne diseases and parasites, etc. So basically everything that affects human health. So that's a One Health concept, which is where we are actually heading towards. And this is what is the future in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. In the One Health program, we talked of soil health, to plant health, to animal health, to man. So there's a complete, as you said, there's the One Health. So that covers the entire thing, but it includes all these aspects that we just mentioned. Maybe the last point from Dr. Pradhan.
We are talking about South Asia region plus. So I think we have to focus also regional cooperation because our regional cooperation has been disturbed due to different things. So we do have regional cooperation at the scale of SAARC, which need to be activated. Also in the case of Hindu Kush Himalayan region, So maybe like one of the key messages that can come from today's discussion would be also like how we can foster the regional cooperation in different aspects, including healthy nutrition or nutrition and food security issue in the region.
Thank you, Dr. Pradhan, for bringing up this very important point. And at this stage, we are almost through the 2 questions, plus others raised in the panel discussion. Now, this is what, the essence is, people have talked of the entire value chain, entire chain. For example, a point was made with regard to post-harvest technology. The problem was raised. Now, agriculture is not just the production. It is from seed to market. We also call it as flow to plate, until the food is consumed. That includes, for example, post-harvest handling, post-harvest losses. The overall global estimate is about 1/3 of the food that we produce is wasted in different forms. Can we afford that at this stage? It is that kind of burning question. So when we discuss agriculture, it is from entire issues of production, consumption, transportation, and then regulation, food safety, and all that. Since other esteemed panelists, I don't want to say anything, but then the issues are so complex, and many times it is beyond the agriculture departments or agriculture ministry. That point we should be clear. And then also a lot of linkages between different ministries handling food. It could be agriculture, horticulture, forestry, dairy, animal husbandry, fisheries, forest, and so on. So first of all, that synergy. And then with other people, other stakeholders in the government, in the private, the public-private partnership. No, it's that kind of a only partnership only can take us forward. That's why we always talk about foresight, innovation, and partnerships. Now, at this stage, what we would like to convey the message is you all have given your very valuable inputs, starting from infrastructure to social security. Food security cannot be in isolation. it has to be a social security dimension has to be taken in, and then the e-commerce angle that's coming up as an emerging. There are many new models coming up in different countries. That's what we would like to capture. How you are delivering, handling food, how you are delivering food, how you are making fortification. For example, today, a grain fortification is being talked of to address the malnutrition aspect. So there are these. So idea is in this webinar to capture those good practices in food production and consumption practices, and as Dr. Pradhan said, more of regional cooperation. How can it make us sustainable as well as resilient? That's where at this stage we would like to say, thanking all the participants outside the panelists also. We would like to say agriculture is everybody's business. It is not just the farmers, not the few researchers or the teachers or the faculty involved in agriculture. Agriculture is everybody's business. So we would like to thank you for your very revealing answers with these two questions. Now at this time we have been allowed. I think we can afford to have a 10-minute break before we come in for talks, and all the 8 esteemed speakers will be speaking for 15 minutes each. Maybe after 12 minutes, I'll raise my hand. Kindly, please make that time so that we also have time for discussion at the end. So we have a 10-minute break right now. Have whatever, tea, coffee, snacks, whatever. We'll come back in 10 minutes. 15:20 Indian Standard Time. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Welcome back. I would again like to welcome our esteemed panelists this afternoon. Over to our talk series, session talks, without taking much time. It is now 15:20 Indian Standard Time. I think we're all back. And then we'll now have the first talk by Dr. Sunita Facknath, the professor in Sustainable Agriculture, Department of Agriculture and Food Science, University of Mauritius, speaking on food security and climate change, perspectives from an Indian ocean island. Madam, 12 minutes would be fine. I would now request you to deliver your talk, please.
And thank you, Chair. So let me start sharing my screen with you straight away. Okay, I just want to confirm, can you all see my screen?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about food security and climate change perspective from Mauritius. Let me tell you that Mauritius is a huge country. We are really big. The whole Republic of Mauritius is bigger than the combined landmass of France, Spain, Italy, and Germany. Now, most people don't realize that, but we are really huge. However, most of our area is underwater. So we only have like 0.1% of land area, which is like 2,040 square kilometers. And we have a population of about 1.3 million inhabitants, and we get something like 1 million tourists annually. So we need to cater for the food needs of all of these people. So if I look at the land mass, it's quite small. And in addition to the small land mass, we have a lot of other challenges for food security, inability to grow key crops. We don't grow any of our staples. Agriculture is dominated by only sugarcane, which is mainly for export. No economy of scale, limited natural resources, high population density, and remote markets. Added to all these problems, now we have climate change. So we are impacted disproportionately. Sea level rise, increasing temperatures, erratic rainfall, higher intensity of cyclones and torrential rain, intermittent droughts, increasing soil salinity, land degradation, increase in pests and diseases. So, is Mauritius a food secure country? Yes, we are food secure. However, that is food security which is based mainly on imported foods. Does that make a comfortable situation? No, it doesn't. So let's see what's being done about it. First of all, let's look at food security and how climate variability and climate change is affecting us. So impacts on all the aspects of food security, for instance, on production, the uncertain weather, rain, cyclone, drought, and so on, increase in pests and diseases, the crop phenology is changing. It also impacts on food supply because, as I said, we depend on imported food. So disruptions in ship and air transportation affects us. Availability of food sources on the world market, sometimes it's not even available. Higher cost of imported food and farm inputs, not just the food, but even the inputs that go into agricultural production. So all this also impacts on the food accessibility, because then the cost of food locally increases. So our poor people, then the disadvantaged, find it difficult to buy food. Therefore, we need to have increasing subsidies by government on food items. And there is also the impact on utilization of food. We talked about sanitation just now, but it's also other climate-related health issues which affects food intake as well as the actual nutrition and assimilation. Mauritius agricultural situation. So the whole agriculture contributes to 3.3% of the GDP, and we are self-sufficient for our food needs up to 23%. The rest is imported food. Our total agricultural exports is about 9.3 billion. Now these are Mauritian rupees, but this is essentially sugarcane, or sugar rather. 41,000 people are employed in the agricultural sector, and our sugarcane area is about 47,000 hectares, so with about 3 million or so tons of sugarcane harvested. Our ocean economy, we have fisheries, capture fisheries, as well as aquaculture, which contributes something like 4% to the GDP. As I said, our ocean economy and the blue economy, we're surrounded by the ocean, so this is an important aspect for us. It represents our historical, cultural, environmental, as well as our economic heritage. We have a vast maritime zone of 2.3 million square kilometers and an additional around 400,000 square kilometers, which we share the management of jointly with Seychelles. It is a key sector for food security because there's capture fisheries as well as aquaculture, not only for the local, but also for the tourists. Tourists in particular love the seafood. And we also export a lot of fish. For instance, the tuna in the Indian Ocean is the second largest provider of tuna. And we also export two fish, the red drum and the sea bass. This is aquaculture or mariculture because it's marine. And this sector represents about 4% of the GDP and employs about 50,000 people. As I said earlier, food security is mainly through importation. So we spend something like $1.1 billion US, about 26% of our total imports on food items, and they come mainly from Europe, from South Africa, India, and Australia. All our staples, rice, wheat products, cereals, pulses, meat, milk, dairy products, potato, onions, oil, even fresh and frozen vegetables, fruits like citrus, grapes, spices, coffee, tea, soft drinks, other beverage, they're all imported. We also import raw materials for animal feed. Okay? Although the feed is formulated here, the raw materials are imported. So government is making a lot of effort to increase local food security, especially in the face of climate variability and climate change. So there are a number of programs and projects on agricultural and agro-industrial development, import substitution. I'll just list a few of the key ones. So like government offers a 40% rebate on air freight for agro products. This is for export, of course. 8-year tax holidays provided for people investing into agricultural activities. There's exemption on all kinds of taxes and duties. We have an interesting cross-border initiative program with neighboring African countries of Madagascar, Tanzania, and Mozambique. This is not only for agriculture, but also for textile and other manufacturing. So basically, these countries provide us with the land that we don't have, large areas of land, and local Mauritian companies then go to these countries and set up their initiatives there. And the idea being that the end product, whether it's agriculture or non-agriculture, is then brought back to Mauritius for the Mauritian market, and it's also exported. Now, it has worked very well in the textile manufacturing sector, these cross-border initiatives. Unfortunately, it has not worked so well in agriculture. So we have this program, but mainly for non-agricultural initiatives. There is also the food processing registration certificate, which promotes global value chain through the importation of raw materials for agriculture, which are then processed into intermediate or finished products, mainly for import. And government then provides the 40% rebate, as well as the 8-year tax holiday and other fiscal benefits. In 2020, quotas were imposed to protect and promote the Made in Mauritius label. For instance, minimum shelf space of 10% in supermarkets for locally manufactured goods. 20% of all government procurement was given to local manufacturing companies and 30% to SMEs. This was increased in 2021 to 40% of shelf space, 30% for local production of foodstuffs. There is also establishment of a centralized digital land bank of all the lands, both state as well as privately owned, which forms a platform to connect landowners with potential agri-producers. Production of higher end products such as nutraceuticals for export. We have our indigenous varieties of lemon, of local medicinal plants. We have, of course, these are not indigenous, but they're very much highly priced. The moringa, the betel, we have honey, chili, turmeric, and so on, which are actually quite unique because the varieties that we have are land races, and they have genes which can actually have economic value. And we, in fact, have actually lived, or we are in the process of actually branding them as geographical indicators. In the 21-22 budget, government announced investments of $122 million in a modernization and transformation fund to modernize agriculture and fisheries. And at the moment, we're setting up a national wholesale market for better and more efficient value chain. The farm to fork concept, some people called it by different names, but basically it's the same concept, that is from the field up to the plate. Encouraging local investors and farmers to move up the value chain, development of bioproduction protocols, training of farmers in biofood production. I would like to mention something here. Mauritius, unfortunately, we are a bit notorious with respect to our pesticide use. So we stand very high in the world world ranking, okay, with respect to intensity and use of pesticides. And this is something government wishes to change. So there's a lot of effort being put into organic farming, biofood production, and so on. So a number of incentives are there for food processing and post-harvest. We heard about that during the panel discussion. We also have the same problem like we've heard in Nepal and Bhutan of post-harvest management. A lot of effort needs to go in there. Sheltered farming schemes are also important for Mauritius because we're in a cyclone belt and we have cyclones, and therefore protected cultivation then is one of the ways to go. Government has established dedicated biofarming zones, and these are provided to people who want to go into organic farming or biofarming, of course with certain conditions. A biofarming certificate has been introduced by government to encourage biofood production. We have developed our own in-house labels, so we call it the MORIGAP, and it has 3 levels, so MORIGAP 1, 2, 3, and beyond that now you go straight for Global GAP, which as we know is a gold standard for food production. As I said, pesticides is a problem. So in 2018, the Use of Pesticides Act was promulgated to give the impetus to biofarming. And also at the level of the consumers, we are sensitizing our public on the importance of consuming organic food, biofood, and to understand and value the difference. To continue, government provides support to farmers after cyclones, after heavy rainfall events, torrential rains, flooding. So they don't actually get cash benefits, but they get seed and compost, and then there are subsidies on fertilizers and field machinery. Government also provides incentives to young agricultural graduates, basically all graduates, but more agricultural graduates, to embark on agribusinesses. So these youngsters are provided with seed money for startup, agro-industrial startup. They get soft loans from the development bank. They have a moratorium to pay back the loans, can be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on the type of scheme. They get a free lease on 1 APA. Now, APA is almost 1 acre. So these youngsters get a free lease on 1 APA of agricultural land, or it could be a greenhouse if they want to go for sheltered farming. And they can also get a 1-year apprenticeship with a monthly stipend. So they get the hands-on training under some kind of mentorship. We have tried rice and wheat production in suitable agro-climatic zones. However, that has not really done well. So our staples still have to be imported. Research and development in new agricultural technologies and sustainable intensification, especially in the face of climate change. So new climate resilient varieties of crops and animal breeds, climate change mitigation and adaptation measures, post-harvest technology, as I mentioned, recycling for circular economy, which is very important. So no wastage, recycle everything that you can. Nuclear technologies are being studied for pest management and also for developing new varieties, such as the new heat-tolerant tomato variety that's very much underway.
You have 2 minutes, madam.
Okay. Marketing and market information services are being strengthened, and then there's capacity building and training, and then there is a regional COVID recovery build back better concept. Different approaches to farming, so climate smart agriculture, bio and organic I mentioned, integrated farming, which has crops and animals and fisheries and aquaculture together, agroforestry, encouraging agriculture even in cities, the urban and peri-urban, and technology-based farming. Reducing vulnerability to climate change through early warning systems, climate information and forecasting, crop modeling, crop and livestock insurance schemes, bad weather allowance to fishermen, agro-processing incentives. And then we also have disaster risk reduction management center and climate information center set up. The Save Soil campaign is very much underway. We're also looking at demand side management, encourage people to practice backyard and rooftop gardening, encourage people to eat local food, potatoes, tubers, and so on. Encourage people to eat underutilized local fruits and vegetables and revalorize them. Reduce food waste and food loss, and improve social amenities in rural areas so that there's less migration to urban areas and therefore fewer food miles. Expanding the ocean economy through a number of schemes and incentives. So cultivation of seaweed, growing sea cucumber, cultivating sea cucumbers, sea urchins, and so on for food as well as nutraceuticals. Rehabilitating coral reefs to improve the marine ecosystem, deep ocean water applications, bioprospecting, and so on. Need is the mother of invention. That's an old adage. I've changed it. I call it need is the mother of change. And I would like to give you the example of food security during the lockdown. We had 2 lockdowns, 2020, 21, and we saw that many people grew vegetables in their backyards. They grew them on roofs and balconies for their own household food security. And then they either shared or sold the rest in front of their houses. Most of this was organically grown. And they also started eating local vegetables, which normally people don't eat because we get all imported food. So they contributed significantly to their own household and community food security. Unfortunately, this did not last long. It stopped when the lockdown lifted. So let us ask ourselves, why do humans require a crisis situation to react the way we should? Just how much money is enough to satisfy human greed? When will all humans look towards the greater good of the planet? Whether we're talking of politicians, we're talking of business people who are only interested in their own vested interests, whether it is a politician looking at only 3 or 5 year terms, whether it's a business person looking at profits and dollars, strong lobbies, all for money. When are we going to look towards the greater good of the planet? When are we going to wait till we reach the tipping points, okay, that we all know of before we take necessary action? Or would I think that this is nature's way of clearing the deck and starting a new species? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm optimistic and I hope that is not the case. So I would paint a much rosier picture with food security for everybody. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the way we need to go. And I would like to address particularly the youngsters in this, well, whoever is logged in. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunita Facknath. A very interesting presentation from the island nation and also very passionate questions that you have raised. Thank you very much from all of us. We'll have the questions at the end of all the presentations. Thank you. Now we move on to Dr. W.A.R.T. Wickramaarachchi from Sri Lanka, speaking on the application of molecular techniques for ensuring climate resilient agriculture. Dr. Wickramaarachchi.
Okay, thank you so much. I have been given application of molecular technology in improving climate resilience in agriculture. Then I want to touch understanding of climate change, then climate change and its effect on agriculture, integrated approaches being used by the region as well as in Sri Lanka as climate smart agriculture technologies and molecular technological approaches towards climate resilient agriculture, and the conclusion. I just want to take one example from our.
Please put the slides. Please put slides in the presentation mode. Enlarge your slides, please.
Yeah, it is in an enlarged mode, sir.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah. in the enlargement. Yes, this is the one actually example, unrealized yield gap. You can see here, where in the maximum realized yield is it's around 10 tons per hectare, but we are end up with the somewhere around the 4.45. But what is this gap is due to several reasons, biotic and poor management. But it is unrealized that the climate change also play. Actually, we have a germplasm. Most of our germplasm can adapt to the adverse ecological condition. You can see here several our rice, maize, chili varieties. They can withstand until the certain level of the temperature. But if beyond that, there is a adverse effect on the pollinations, as well as it will create empty pods, then affect the photosynthesis and so on. Understanding of the climate change and the global warming. This the global warming is everybody known to this word. That is the overall increase of the amount of temperature, energy in the globe, and this is to the greenhouse gases. Actually, climate change is the significant variation of the atmospheric composition for extended period of time. This is an extended period of time that will attribute the human activities. In simply, weather pattern changes in one direction can be defined as the climate change. This is the climate variability and change, how it's climate variabilities, year-to-year fluctuation around the long-term mean. The climate change is the trend of anomalies around the long-term mean. There is a little bit differences are there in this. Then actually, how this climate change affect on the agriculture, this greenhouse gas emission raise the temperature. This will affect the melting glaciers, then unpredictable rainfall patterns, extreme weather events. Ultimately, this will affect the crop growth and also the food security. Then climate change impact agriculture in every region of the world based on the projected. There's 17% reduction in yield by 2050. But, importantly, this global south and the tropical, subtropical countries are more vulnerable for the climate change. Therefore, we are in the risky area. The overall impact of climate change on agriculture was described by IPCC. Then we'll see this is a climate change and the effect on agriculture due to the increase of the average temperature may affect the growing season, then ultimately yield. Similarly, change in the amount of the rainfall and the change patterns also affect the soil moisture, erosion, as well as finally yield. The raise in atmospheric concentration of the carbon dioxide.
Don't worry about the slides. Can you kindly summarize your presentation?
No, yeah. Let me summarize actually how we can the molecular biotechnique with the climate in agriculture. Actually, climate resilient agriculture technologies we are much focus on the agronomic factors and other, but we have not much exploit this molecular biology activities for the resilient activity, the approaches. But we have used many of these approaches, especially for the rice crop, because it is our main crop, the staple. In the identification of the resistant traits, we use the markers, SSR markers, RAPD markers for the identification of the traits, then salinity tolerance, then drought tolerance, and so on. Then this can be used later on as the mark-assisted selection for the expedite the breeding process. These are the one area we use the molecular biological approaches in Sri Lanka towards the resilience. But in addition to this one, used several the markers to identify the traits, identify the suppose we are going to identify the salt tolerance genes through the plants, the wild relatives, and later on we are going to tap these genes and incorporate it into our plants through the conventional plant breeding. Still, actually, we have not going for the GM crops since we don't have it is there in the laboratory level, but not in the commercial level. Yet to the biosafety rules and regulations are to be implemented in Sri Lanka. For most GM works has been a little bit retarded because of the legislate it won't allow legislative provision, but it is in the last stage now. Therefore, in future we can make use of this genetically modified crops in order to produce the climate resilient varieties. But now, right now, we are using the mark assisted selection only for as a climate resilient approach used using the molecular biology. That is what from the Sri Lankan side. But I have in my presentation, I have mentioned many other examples, regional and global level examples. But thing is, most of the molecular biology in the regions either limited to the laboratories, but it has not gone to the farmer fields to get the benefits to the farmer. Because one thing is there is a policy issues. Other thing, we don't have the facilities and other kind of infrastructure to come up with the tangible output. That is one thing. There are two ways. There's a policies are there in certain countries, like India. The varieties develop against the pest resistant, then abiotic resistant. That will be used by other countries. Thing is, in Sri Lanka, we cannot use these varieties because legislative provisions are not towards the use of the molecular varieties, GM varieties. That is the Sri Lankan scenario, because we have not much exploit the molecular biology towards development of varieties. That is Sri Lankan scenario regarding the molecular biology aspect. But there are many other evidences, many other examples being used this molecular biology for many other purposes, especially detection of plant viruses, plant diseases, identification of pests. This we are really use one. But, for the towards GM, it is a little bit retarded and not encouraging since the policy issues in Sri Lanka. Thank you. With regards to the use of molecular biological techniques towards the resilience, climate resilience in agriculture, we have not much right in this area. That is the conclusion. But now there are most of the laboratories across the country are doing much, but it has to still go to the field level. But in case of the rice, have done enough work because that is the staple crop, and also throughout the country the rice been spread. Then we have identified in some areas it has been affected by salinity, some areas due to the flooding, then due to drought conditions, the rice crop is affected. Therefore, our scientists have engaged much on rice crop for the development and use of molecular biological aspects towards the identification of desired traits related to the climate change, such as salinity tolerance, then heat drought tolerance, as pest resistance, because pest disease spectrum also changed during the past years due to the climate change effect. Therefore, some of the diseases previously considered as the major diseases has now become minor diseases, and certain other diseases has come emerge as the major diseases. Then this kind of in the conventional breeding techniques we have much use, but as a supporting tool we use the molecular biological techniques as the supporting tool for the conventional hybridization programs in the Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wickramaarachchi, for this presentation. We understand there were some technical problems, but then you have made your points and the potentials of using new molecular tools in crop improvement, particularly with regard to rice. Thank you very much for your presentation. We now move on to Dr. Prajal Pradhan, the senior scientist at the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research in Germany, speaking on need of systematic transformation of food systems, a focus on South Asia and Nepal. Dr. Pradhan, over to you for about 15 minutes, please. Dr. Pradhan.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me share my slides about food systems in South Asia. Okay. Today I will be talking more about food system or need for food system transformation in South Asia and Nepal. Mostly my work is focused on the global scale, but I will try to present some results that is mainly for South Asia and especially for Nepal. When we talk about food system, what we need to understand is like foodness system, it starts even before we produce food, like from pre-production stage to let's say also to the post-consumption stage when you talk about food loss, food waste, and also how we use the waste we are generating there. And food system is also not standalone. We have a lot of interlinkages with our ecosystems, which is very basic, or which is the very foundation where we produce food. There is also climate system and also socioeconomic system, which is linked to our food system. One of the desirable outcome of our food system is food security. So we talk about food security, ensuring not to having like all three form of malnourishment in the planetary. Yeah. So, and when we talk about the current food system, what is said is food systems are broken. So why our food systems are broken? There are mainly like two main reasons for that. The first thing is like one of the outcome of the food system is food security. However, we are living in a strange world where even in a same country, there are people suffering from overweight and obesity, at the meantime, underweight and hidden hunger. So we have a triple burden of malnourishment. That means food system is not able to provide the desirable outcome at the moment. Second thing is, like, when you look at our food systems, what we can see is that food system is responsible for transgressing of various planetary boundaries. Food system is responsible for nutrient pollutions in water bodies, nitrogen and phosphorus boundaries has been transgraded, also holds for biodiversity losses, mainly due to land use, land cover changes. And food system is also considered as one of the major driver of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission. A third of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions come from food system. So this is more like a picture of how the food system is now and why it is broken. Our food system is not able to ensure food security for all, and it has various negative impacts to our environments, or has contributed in transgressing planetary boundaries. And when we look at food systems in South Asia, since in this project we look at few South Asian countries, so I don't have this picture for all the countries, South Asian countries here, so apology for that, but I hope this also holds for other countries. What we can see here is, like, across time, the crop production has been increased in the region. This holds for all countries here. And what we can see is, like, there is also increase in crop productivity, so which was a bit more prominent before, but now it's not much the case. And one of the important thing is this compound annual crop productivity, or crop productivity increase rate of 2%, which is needed if we want to double the food productivity in the next 30-40 years. So when we talk about, like, doubling the products, when we think about scenarios where population increase in population and need to and also the need of growing food demand and need to double the food production, it is quite sure that the current productivity increase rate is not enough to double the food production by 2020 in the region. And this holds for almost all the countries here in the region. Second thing is, like, when you talk about food production, it's not only food production, but also food trade has been increased in the region across the years. There are countries where food which used to be let's say net food importer before, but now it's becoming more and more net food exporter. Here the example would be of China here, of India here. So and then we can also see that we are also trading a lot of food within the region here, and due to this interconnection, what we need to emphasize is also the need for regional cooperation here. Due to this increasing trade and also increasing food production, what we can see is also the improvement on nutritional status in the region. Mainly what we can see here is, like, the dotted line shows the dietary energy requirement, and whenever and here the different bars shows the food supply in the country for different food groups or food commodities here, or group of food commodities here. And when the value is less than value is below this dotted line, it says that in these countries at that period of time there is less food available than that is required for its population. But what we can see here is that across time the food availability has increased in all the countries, and also interesting thing is, like, we can also see some sort of dietary changes here. It's not clear in this part because major source of our calories is coming from cereals here. So in a way, it's a good news that we have more calories to feed. But what we can see is that I would come back towards the health issue in the end. But here, another issue, what we can see is like also the consumer price index has increased in this region across time, and which is also one of the outcome of our food system, like food becoming expensive in the region compared to previous years, yeah. And second issue is also like our agriculture is also responsible for anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, and across time in all the countries, what we can see is like increase in emission due to our agricultural activities. And talking about emission from food systems is needed, because without halting or without reducing the emission of food systems, it will be hard to achieve the below 2-degree target or 1.5-degree target agreed in Paris, even if global use of fossil fuel or fossil energy would be stopped. And when you look at the other outcome, mainly in terms of food security, what we can see is like one of the good news is that the share of underweight population has decreased in all the countries. But at the meantime, the problem is the share of overweight and obese share of population suffering from overweight and obesity is increasing across all the countries. And even in some countries, what we can see is that overweight and obesity population is now more people are either overweight or obese compared to underweight. Like the overweight and obesity is becoming an health problem more than underweight or undernourishment in the region. And that's somewhat like alarming situation. In a way, we are going from some sort of like a nutritional transition phase from undernourishment to overconsumption. And we can see here also, when you compare the viability of different products like calories, dietary energies, red meat, fruits and vegetables, carbohydrate, fat, for the country across a period of like a 50 years time. And what we can see here is like increasingly in the region, we have more carbohydrate than needed. In some cases, we also have more dietary energy than needed. Yeah, increasing consumption of red meat might not be a problem for at the country scale, but at the individual level, this might be a concern. And in countries, we also have lower than recommended amount of fat, food, protein, and fruits and vegetables. However, more than recommended amount of sugar. And this is one of the reasons why we have this problem of let's say increasing overweight and obesity in the region. So this is one of the picture of broken food systems in South Asia and all, which also holds globally. The good news here is like there are also a lot of food system response options which can be used to fix the broken systems, and it also have other core benefits. Like in the plenary panel discussion, and we heard about livelihood issues. Yeah, so there are a lot of food systems response options which could be deployed for not only climate change adaptation and mitigation, but also to fix the broken food system, and also having other core benefits in terms of health, livelihood, energy, water. And one of the key aspect here is to consume sustainable and healthy diets. This is key because when we look at dietary patterns across the world, there's A to K are 11 different dietary patterns that generalize food supply in countries across last 50 years. Yeah, what we can say is like is that in most of this food system there is increased calories or more calories than needed, but also there is less needed food commodity like fruits and vegetables. So dietary changes towards adequate amount of calories but increased consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, legumes, whole grains, yeah, reduced consumption of sugar will definitely help to transform our food system towards more like a healthy food system. And it's also good in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emission, water use, energy use, and land use coming from the food system as well. So we discussed in the plenary also about food loss issue, which is mainly happened at the producer level and also supply chain level, yeah. But also important thing is food waste. So reducing food loss and waste is also quite crucial response option to fix the food system. As we heard already, a third of food is either lost or wasted. And in low income or middle income countries like in South Asia, there is a lot of issue of food loss, which could be solved by proper infrastructure. And if we manage to solve the issue of food loss and food waste, it will also contribute to climate change mitigation as well. Another thing, what we heard in the morning is also about smallholder farmers and low crop productivity in the region. So what we can see here is like the reddish color means that this region is producing around like 40 to 40% of its potential in terms of agriculture based on the soil, weather conditions, and in the condition where there is high input and current technologies available. So what we can see here is like in the regions in India, Nepal, Bhutan, in most of the places we are producing around less than 40% of its potential crop production capacity. So if we have if we deploy adequate strategies, we discuss about some of these strategies in the panel discussion about like access to market, either for farmers or farmers to sell their produce or to get required input, will help to close these yield gaps. So we do have like a bundle of required input and management strategies that we can deploy to close our yield gap. And in the region, this is one of the crucial point there. Yeah, but whenever we talk about closing yield gap, we have to also think about sustainable agricultural intensification, not only intensification, intensification in a traditional way. A second thing we also mentioned, we heard about this example of Mauritius before, like agriculture in a urban, peri-urban region. Yeah, although it might be a small rooftop farm or a balcony farm producing vegetables. So what we can see here is like a lot of potential of urban and peri-urban agriculture in the region to nourish the population. Yeah, which could be higher in the scenario where we close our yield gap, because here when we see that the color is greenish in the top panel for the region, because it says like around 50%, there is a nourishment potential of around 50%, which could change to around 100% if we close the yield gap. So our urban and peri-urban areas has the potential to nourish it's a majority of its population, but for this we need to close crop yield gaps. And also at some point it might also be good to preserve or conserve this agricultural land or from urban growing urban settlements there, and also practicing some sort of urban agriculture would help here. So when you talk about all these food systems, these various actions toward the food systems towards like a sustainable food system transformation also helps to meet not only food and nutrition security issue, but also it also will have positive impact across many SDGs. However, if we based on subsistence agriculture, it will definitely have negative impact on some SDGs. This also holds for relying heavily on globalized food system. At the meantime,
Dr. Pradhan, maybe we can have 2-3 minutes more.
Yeah, thank you. I'm almost done. Yeah, and then we do have like achieving SDGs also enables sustainable transformation of our food systems. Yeah? So saying that, I would like to highlight let's say this 8 key action points to transform our food system. The first thing that could be crucial in the region is sustainable intensification to close the crop yield gap, to enhance the productivity, especially among the smallholder farmers. Second issue is about consuming and promoting sustainable and healthy diets. That means consumption of, because in our region, we are heavily based on staples, mainly on cereals. So we have to reduce consumption of cereals, but increase consumption of legumes, consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts, and other plant-based products. We definitely need to avoid food loss, food waste. Food loss could be avoided by better infrastructure. Food waste need to be avoided by raising awareness. We have to connect producer with the business, because in the remote areas in Himalayas, many business producer will not have connection with the business because of lack of access of road or connectivity. We have to think about regional and local food systems. We talk about local produce like neglected and underutilized crop. We need to promote them, which also have a high value. So we talked about social protection, empowerment of women before. That is also needed. Urban, peri-urban agriculture, and definitely we need investment in research, innovation, and extension service. And I would like to add here in terms of South Asia. We also need to foster the regional cooperation. Saying that, I would like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pradhan, for this very comprehensive presentation. You have touched upon all aspects: technology, policy, delivery, everything. So thank you so much for being with us. I had to request Dr. Pradhan before Dr. Prem Lama, for this reason that Dr. Pradhan has to attend a meeting. So he requested, so I made this change. I hope all of us would agree. I'd like to thank Dr. Pradhan at this stage and invite Dr. Prem Lama, Director of the Operations and Strategy at the Bhutan Ecological Society, Bhutan, for her presentation on transforming Bhutan's food system towards food security, improved nutrition, and inclusive socio-economic development. Dr. Prem Lama from Bhutan, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Let me share my screen. Is this visible? Is my screen okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Great. So good afternoon again. And I think in some ways it was good that Dr. Pradhan went before me, because I think he's captured a lot of what I was going to speak about. And of course, even the example from Mauritius, I think, gives a little bit of a preview to what I would say. I'll talk a little bit from food systems assessment work that I was a part of, and the report is out. I'll share the information later, but I just wanted to capture the gist of the assessment and share it in this panel. So for those of you who don't know about Bhutan, it's a very, very small country in between India and China. It's if you look at the picture on the right, it's the small reddish dot. So it's a very small country, a little bit smaller than Switzerland. And topographically, it's quite similar to, I would say, Nepal and other Himalayan sort of regions of India, because we're also in the Himalayas. So it's very, very rugged. We are also a very small country by population, under 1 million, so 750,000. Currently. And one of the, I think, interesting factors for food production, especially in Bhutan, is that we actually have less than 3% of the total land area that's arable. So not only is Bhutan already small, but that we have very, very small area that we can actually grow food. So I think that puts a very interesting sort of twist on when it comes to food security and sustainable food systems in Bhutan. And of course, some of the, I think, key trends, which I think is similar to all different countries as well, not just in Bhutan, is migration, urbanization issues, but also at this juncture, I think climate change and climate-related sort of disasters that impact everything, but especially also food systems. So some of the trends and characteristics of agriculture in Bhutan, I've divided into several different topics. So the first one is farms and farmers. So what does Bhutanese farms and farmers look like? As I'd mentioned earlier in our discussion, Bhutanese farms are actually 99% of them are smallholder farms, and the farm size is, the average land holding size is 3.7 acres, which is about 1.5 hectares. So very, very small land. And so a lot of people, I mean, we call Bhutanese farming community because there's 60% of Bhutanese population is involved in agriculture. But at the same time, these are very small farms. So I think that's an important factor to keep in mind. And as I mentioned earlier as well, some of the Bhutanese agricultural land is also now left fallow because of the terrain issues, but also some of the other issues such as human-wildlife conflict and just the generational shift, I would say, away from farming as more people are getting educated and coming out of poverty and rural lives. They're more attracted to jobs that allow them to sit at a desk or not really be engaged in the drudgery related to agriculture. In terms of the agricultural input, unlike Mauritius, I think Bhutan does quite well. We use very limited pesticides, but also chemical fertilizer use is quite small, I think, compared to other countries around the world and in the region. But we also have limited farm mechanization in terms of agriculture input. Usually, farmers farm the way they did, as I mentioned earlier, about 20, 30 years ago, and so not much has changed in that sphere. In terms of credit and information, for especially related to rural development and agriculture, I would say that it exists. I mean, similar to, I think, some of the examples cited in Mauritius, there are a lot of government interventions aimed at rural development, aimed at providing credit for farmers. But I think the capacity of farmers to avail the services is a little limited, owing to either the literacy, not having enough financial literacy to understand how loans work maybe, but also maybe sometimes it's the lack of collateral, and sometimes it's just the physical distance. Farms in Bhutan, or I would say villages in Bhutan, are quite sparse and very broadly distributed. So sometimes farmers just can't come to the nearest bank or the financial institution to get loans. Also, the technical knowledge in terms of agricultural innovations or new ways of farming to make it more productive or efficient, or looking at newer technology and uses to improve their farm outputs is quite limited. I mean, again, there's a lot of government intervention, but at the same time, the results are not quite promising at the moment. And finally, as we have mentioned earlier in our chats, I think the marketing and sort of post-harvest management is a huge challenge in Bhutan. There's really, there are some budding small businesses that are doing value addition and small agribusinesses that are coming up with government support as well in terms of promoting what they call brand Bhutan, where we are promoting niche products from Bhutan to export as well as within for internal consumption. But these are, I would say, in a smaller scale right now. And of course, the government is also involved in some facilitation of export of certain commodities to the region, especially when it comes to horticultural products like oranges and apples, as well as spices, cardamom, ginger, and usually these are exported to India and Bangladesh. So that's, kind of like what Bhutanese agriculture looks like at the moment. As I mentioned, I'll go through quickly on the assessment that we did. And what we took was a systems perspective, like a systems thinking perspective and the conceptual framework to assess how Bhutan is doing in various aspects. I won't dwell too much on this graph here, the graphic here, but just to show that our food system is indeed, quite goes from production to transport, processing, retail, consumer, and so there are lots of things that are involved within that cycle. But this was really the conceptual framework that we used in order to do our assessment of Bhutanese food systems. And in the middle where there is the light yellow shading, that's the core system, right? Similar to the image I just showed earlier. But as you can see, like on the outside, when we talk about systems thinking and sort of this food systems, that there are a lot of different drivers and a lot of different outcomes that kind of influence the core food system. And this was sort of what we used in order to do our assessment. So what did our assessment, result in? So when we look at the economic perspective of the food system, we find that in Bhutan, that the agriculture and of course livestock forestry, which is also the primary sector, it accounts for about 16% of GDP, but employs around 50% of the employed people in Bhutan, and that Bhutan also export some of the high-value crops, such as I mentioned earlier, cardamom, mandarin, areca nut, ginger, apples. And so this has played a part in poverty reduction and inclusive growth in Bhutan. So it has had a good, in some ways, historically, the agriculture system is supporting the economic development in the country. But there's also a flip side to it. Although we produce some and we export some, Bhutan actually imports, same as Mauritius, a very, very large quantity of food that we consume. And most of these imports come from India, but they also come from a few other different countries. Bhutan imports, it's a very rice-dependent country, I think similar to many other South Asia and Southeast Asian countries, but most of it is imported. But not just that, we are importing, from tea to cooking oil to a large quantity of packaged food. So as you can see in the graphs here, you can see how over especially the last 5 to 10 years, how much our food imports have increased. And the graph below, the second graph shows how much of whatever we eat, like what is imported from outside and what we actually grow and consume ourselves. And you can see that most of what we eat actually comes from import. So from an economic perspective, as I mentioned earlier, there is a little bit of export and a little bit of, I would say, economic development due to the agriculture sector. But as a food system, looking also at the consumption side, we are also paying quite I would say, a big price in import bills. From a health perspective, looking at the food system here, we don't have as much of a hunger that I think we see in some of the other countries around the world, but there is malnutrition, especially some mineral deficiencies in Bhutan, and also prevalence of anemia and stunting in children is quite common, especially in the rural areas. And I think as is the trend all over the world, there is obesity, hypertension, and other non-communicable diseases due to the type of diet change that we've had. From an environment perspective, Bhutan's food system, I think, is quite good in that there isn't so much of a negative impact on from agricultural activities, mainly because we don't use as much pesticides or chemical fertilizers. So it's quite good, and I think our environment, due to Bhutan's strong environmental laws, our agriculture hasn't necessarily destroyed the environment. But I think when it comes to sort of waste from the non-biodegradable waste because of the packaged food we import, there is an environmental impact from actually the import of packaged foods. So not necessarily food waste per se, but I would say sort of the packaging that comes with food has had some environmental impact in Bhutan. When we look at the social and sort of the regional perspective of how the food systems work, on the image, there's the map of Bhutan where it shows sort of the different territories and how it differs. I think from the assessment, we were also trying to look at not homogenizing the country's experience with food system, right? Because as we know, some parts of the country can have very different realities than others. And because Bhutan is quite mountainous, the accessibility in some parts of the country is quite different than others. And I think what we found is that there are parts, especially the part that's shaded in sort of light red, the interior hinterlands, as we've called them. These have the potential to produce food, but they are also kind of removed from the food systems because there isn't enough connectivity in terms of market of what they produce to take them to the area marked for, which is the consumption clusters. So there are, and the other aspect is like the high north is actually very sort of cold place with like an alpine vegetation where they don't grow a lot of food. So different areas in Bhutan actually have different food insecurities or issues related with food availability and even prices, for example. And so I think the other impact in terms of social perspective of food system is that COVID, as I mentioned earlier, has had a big impact in Bhutan in making us realize how if there was such a event where we'd have to close off from the rest of the world, that we really are in quite a vulnerable position in terms of access to the food that we need to, I guess, live. So those were the various different perspectives in terms of how our food system impacts or like manifests in reality. And then I wanted to touch a little bit upon the challenges and trade-offs of sort of the Bhutanese food system. I think the first challenge is environment and agriculture. For those of you that don't know, Bhutan has very, very strong environmental laws guided by our philosophy called gross national happiness, which is a more of a holistic development approach. And so environment features quite prominently. And a lot of our policies are always kind of judged against how much impact that would have on environmental well-being, which I think is a great thing. But at the same time, because of strong environmental laws, I think a lot of the land that we have is then dedicated to, I think, preserving biodiversity than growing food. So there's always this challenge. And also, like, for example, in growing organically is, of course, a great thing, but also comes with some challenges of, or not as many advantages of using maybe fertilizers or pesticides that might help with the volume of food that you can produce. So there is this, I think, balancing act that we have to take between protecting our environment and then growing food that suffices for our consumption. The other challenge we have is sort of the urban pull. So a lot of Bhutanese rural areas are being emptied out because everyone is moving towards mainly the capital city, but also some of the other, I would say, urban centers within Bhutan, which means there are not enough people in the rural areas to work as agricultural labor. And it's a very big problem that labor shortages is one of the highest sort of one of the high-ranking factors of why we are leaving our lands fallow. The other, I think, challenge we have, or a trade-off that we need to consider in Bhutan, is sort of this export promotion or producing for an internal consumption, because I think those two.
Kindly wind up.
Yes. Sure. This is almost the end. So there is this export promotion, which means we grow, different maybe varieties of things, which would be attractive for international market, or do we grow more to feed ourselves? I think, but I think the advantage of export promotion is sort of the premium that we might be able to get in terms of helping rural communities in Bhutan gain, income for their livelihoods. And I think the last sort of challenge and trade-off is the risk, what I call the risk and opportunity cost of farming, which is that, yes, I think food is important and agriculture is a big employer in Bhutan, but at the same time, there are new aspirations of especially the young population. So how do you deal with that? How do you still keep having this food security in the face of people wanting to move away from agriculture? So I think that's a huge challenge for Bhutan. I will not go through too much in detail on the pathways of what I think are important, because I think these have been highlighted very well by Mr. Pradhan just earlier. But I think some of the things to think about is improving infrastructure as well as services in rural Bhutan, increasing and improving production of the food of the foods that we're already growing, strengthening sort of post-harvest and food value chain activities, improving standards and certification, especially when it comes to the local food, and so just bringing it up to the market. And then, of course, supporting, promoting, I think, sustainable consumption, as Dr. Pradhan mentioned, is very important, because I think this is one of the main pull factors that will drive our food systems to be more productive. So I'll leave it at that. And the report that I was presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Penlam, for this presentation. Now we move on to Dr. Ohnmar Khaing, Policy Consultant, United Nations from Myanmar, on transforming food systems, perspectives from Myanmar. Dr. Khaing, please, about 12 minutes will be good. So now we have time for discussions also. Dr. Khaing, please.
Yes, let me share the screen. Sorry, I have electricity cut, so a minute, I need to reconnect. Okay. Let me know if you see it clearly.
Yes, fine. 12 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So, since Myanmar is between two big powerful countries, India and China, and are very close to Thailand, close neighbor to Thailand, that we have a big, very diverse situation of cultural, and also right now that the political instability and also climate change impact. So I will just highlight that what is happening as guided by the note of this webinar, and also what we are doing at the gap analysis of the policy, and what we need to do in the future as a long-term perspective to be able to rebuild the food system in Myanmar. So since last year, we have, this is just brief overview of the food security situation. That since last year, we have 2.8 million, it's already food insecure in Myanmar. This is because of the situation of the country people, and W.A.R.T estimate that it's more, it's will be the more additional people could be at risk of the food insecurity. That also include the human health situation. So this is the need of emergency assistance that W.A.R.T just mentioned on the 14th April of this month. So this is the shorter term food security impacts in country. So the first one is, when we measure the household living at the national poverty level, it is approximately 65% on food, and 82% of caloric intake comes from the rice, pulses, nuts, and cooking oil. So this is pretty much agriculture source. Of course, we also have the fishery and livestock source, but I'm not able to mention here. And the adding up, the one more serious situation is weakening our local currency. So I mean, this is really disturb to the trade and market system. Although the market is still functioning at the local level, although we are affected by the border closed by the border trade closed by the China for the security reason, as well as for the COVID-19 restrictions from the China side. So I mean, the policy issue not only from the national level, but also from the neighbor country. I mean, the region at the regional level is very much important for the border trade. So we have a big population displacement in Northeast, and middle part of the country, central dry zone areas, the Khaing region and Magwe region a little bit. And in the northeast region, pretty much we have IGP. People are already increasing during these days. So look at the medium and long-term perspective. And the food security of smallholder farmers, we really need to support because of, they are the primary producer of the food in country. That also include, small fisher and also small livestock holders, as well as, the media and small enterprises who are processing this from the primary producer as a processed food. So, I mean, this is really, having the challenges in the agriculture system, not only in that case, but also in the processing sector. Most of the people the job are losers because of, some international business entities already left the country, and also the local business sector are really struggling with the higher cost of logistics sector. And also commodities are also double and triple higher costs. So, I mean, this is really important to consider the inclusiveness of the food system for Myanmar. So, some rural people are, really depending on the remittance, but this also remittance losses are also happening because of, many people are not able to return back, and many people are also lost the job in the border areas. So this is also affected to the rural economy, particularly to the vulnerable community who are really need in assistance of this kind of thing. So WFP estimate that 3-month scenario will be the informationness of operational about 80% capacity, while 6-month scenario estimated that informationness where operational will reduce 50% capacity in the next 6 months. So this is the recent, overall brief for the food security situation in country. So let me come up with the key points of the food system in country. So we have the very diverse value chain, very diverse value chain. I mean, depending upon our agroeconomic regions, dry zone, rain-fed, irrigated, hilly and mountainous area, also coastal areas that occupied by the different and also particular crops and value chain products. So this is important that we have a rapid out of migration. So how do we increase real income? So this is also need to consider when we something to integrate into the food system policy and also implementation. That's why I already said that in the panel discussion, we are still in the early transformation of food system in country because we're not able to move from this stage. So I mean, because the first point of agriculture related to agriculture food system, I think highly equitable land access is the first and foremost a primary sector for this region. You can imagine that 5 million smallholder farmers, amount of the 70% average, they own only 2 acres. So this is pretty much lower than 5 acres when we average with the ASEAN countries and also now South Asian countries. Compared to Thailand and also the Vietnam, we have very much low productivity. For example, maize, we also call corn. I mean, this productivity level is only 3 times higher. Thailand is higher than us, and while China is higher than us 6 times. So, I mean, this is pretty much need to be considered when we're thinking about the agriculture-related food system in country. Also, very much, related to that, high transportation cost is happening since last year. So this is really affected to the marketing system and so trade system. Particularly that the vehicles and also containers could not able to function well because of the restrictions of the COVID-19 measures, as well as security reasons, as well as high transportation costs. Also, train was almost stopped, but it's refunctioning right now, but at a very low quality and low value addition. So I mean, our export sector, we have some limitations, at the border. Got the problem with the policy measures by the border countries. So this is also pretty much need to consider that regional policy. How do we integrate? How do we help each other? I mean, to relief from this kind of imposing importing countries. So I mean, this is pretty much shocks that after COVID and develop with the coup. So the lockdown is really disrupt to the supply chain, and movement restrictions make the villagers not able to sell their products into the township, and also local traders. The local traders are not able to move to the regional traders, the wholesale market. So this triple effect, it's also happen to the access to imports and markets. So higher feed costs for livestock also having the problem with the maize production and also soybean production. So that's why the cost of egg and also other the commodities are also increasing up. So banking center, the effect last year is a banking center is cash withdrawal problem, and then the informal financial functioning is really influencing in the trading centers. This really make the Myanmar currency it's lower and lower, and it is a less and value is very much less right now. So major increase in fuel transportation is really in and out. We have to really higher up this percentage. So I mean, this is really affected to the all the logistic chain, the whole value chain, starting from the growing to the end market. Since last year, also we have a large increase in fertilizer price. This still, the policy is there, regulation is there, but they cannot able to function and cannot able to monitor the true issues at the ground level, and not reflected by the regulations and policy at the top decision maker level. So this is the huge gap happening between the decision making level and also with the mid-level and also with the ground level. So there is huge gap happening among the stakeholders. This is the thing that people are not able to get and access to the proper and real situation. The information is only at the ground level, and then this is really policy methods and influences and also implementation is not really compatible. So what the policy issues, what the policy impose, and then what is the happening at the ground level. So this is just I just uptake from the analysis of IFPRI and some UN reports, UNDP reports. So this is just 3 sectors I abstract from this. So
Madam, you have 2 minutes. Kindly summarize.
Thank you. So nutrition sector and food security sector, and also the market competitiveness. How do we promote nutrition sensitive or our food supply chains? How do we invest in the correct and proper system to increase investment in the quality control, nutrition sensitive food system for longer perspective of Myanmar? I think the dream is stay far, but I think we are, even though we have many challenges and difficulty, we are in the beginning stage, but we are seeing the opportunities from the fragile state. So the opportunities is local market are still functioning, and we are still producing the food. So we can really promote to the international market, regional market, as well as to feed our people. So I think these are just short to the point that how we have to do first as the emergency state. As I already mentioned in the panel discussion, the second is how we need to rebuild resilient rural community. This is mentally, physically, everything we have to fill up to rebuild in the conflict affected area, particularly in the northeast and also central dry zone area. There's the Gai region. So that also include climate impact resilient agribusiness value chain are also very important for the purpose of improving agriculture sector. So education is very important, also formally and informally, to give awareness and campaign virtually or physically. This is also very important among women and youth. So there is still need to be analysis. What are the gap right now in the situation after the COVID and during the coup. But I think we have to go with the backward. It's not forward, backward with the bottom-up approach. And also the most important thing is how do we create an enabling environment to be able to include all the considerations and concerns of food system in Myanmar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaing, for this presentation. Now I request Dr. Devish Roy from IFPRI, India, for his presentation on roles of policies and programs in ensuring access, affordability for a healthy and nutritious diet in India. Dr. Devish Roy, please, 12 minutes, please.
Yeah, so thank you. I'll just, okay. So let me just get to sharing the screen. So I just want to see where is. I'm just looking for where is that file actually.
So do you want me to share the slides?
Yeah, you can actually. I don't know what is happening. I'm not getting the share screen thing, and when I click on it, I don't get the file that I've opened.
It's okay. I'll just share them.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I'll actually, I'm going to be talking about roles of policies and programs in ensuring access, increasing affordability of a healthy and nutritious diet in India, as the title suggests. I'm going to start by just, there's the first slide that you see that what is the landscape in India, where there's a term that only economists use, which is kind of stylized facts. So I'll just talk about some stylized facts which people have talked already. So I'm not going to be dwelling them into in very much detail, except that, you have this triple burden of malnutrition, you have undernutrition, you have micronutrient deficiency, and you have overnutrition. So it's addressing all kind of malnutrition. There are few things that I want to highlight. The pace at which overweight and obesity, the rate at which it has been progressing, it has almost doubled in the past decade. And women are more likely to be overweight and obese than men. So it's not only about diets, it's also about lifestyle, that will come to. So next slide. So here is the problem. So if you have to understand the problem that we're talking about, the triple burden of malnutrition, there are a lot of factors behind it, but we are going to focus on a slice of it or slices of it, so to say. So we are going to look at diets, what people are eating, what they are eating, where they are eating, what is being produced, and how it has evolved over time. So there's definitely India has made sterling growth in agriculture production, and people from our national agriculture system will testify to their real great work in terms of transforming India from really food deficit country to food surplus country. But there is also at the same time the dietary transition where there's if you go to the granular level, there will be decline in consumption of coarse cereals, rising consumption of meat, salt, fat, sugar, falling consumption of pulses, which is very dear to me. And then there's a compositional change in edible oil where, 60-70% of your edible oil is all imported, and mostly it's palm oil, which is not the healthiest of oil, as you know. There's a rising consumption of snacks, and I will come to that, what we really think about as snacks. And so snack is, generally in the literature taking as a food occasion, but I'm talking about snack from a food that is kind of obesogenic. So we did this paper, which was, we need a benchmark to say how healthy or unhealthy the Indian diets are. Or so from a very sustainable food perspective, there were the East Lancet recommended diet. We did this paper looking at India's diets in comparison with the Eat Lancet diet. And this is the paper that I'm talking about. And what do we get from here? It recommended healthy diets that can feed like 10 billion people in an environmentally sustainable way. So it's a sustainable food system. So we compare the India's food consumption patterns across income groups, regions, sectors, with this reference diet and see where India lies. So first, the average daily calorie consumption in India is less than the recommended one in the Eat Lancet diet. And the calorie consumption or calorie share of whole grains is significantly higher than the Eat Lancet recommendations. And share of calories from protein sources is only 6 to 8% compared to 29% in the reference diet. And this is the imbalance is highest for the lowest decile of consumption expenditure. But even richest households do not consume adequate amount of fruits, vegetables, and non-cereal proteins. So an average, and most importantly, I would say, I mean, in some ways, an average Indian household consumes more calories from processed foods than fruits and consumes more cereal than fruits and vegetables. So this is the dietary landscape. And so I'm not getting into more detail, but the Indian diet across all states and income groups are unhealthy, if you take that as the benchmark. And so we need to really accelerate the food system transformation, of food system-wide effort to make diets healthier and sustainable, more accessible, affordable, and acceptable. That is all issue include into the food quality and safety. So we need changes in India's food system. I'm just saying that you need to shift to healthier diet. But when you shift to healthier diet, from a food system perspective, you're also required to change in production patterns. You cannot be producing rice, wheat all the time, right? You need to really have a different, so that's one element. Second, we require change in food environment, in which the food is accessed, it's afforded, it's all about comprising the food environment if you go with the classical food system definition, right? So we really definitely produce too much of rice, sugarcane, too little, of course, cereals, pulses, fruits, and vegetables. And if you come from a sustainable perspective, we are doing really a lot of water guzzlers like rice, sugarcane, and so on. And then there are other things. If you're from Delhi, then there's the rice farmers who have to burn residues and all their environmental effects and all. So it requires a lot of changes there. So what I would really argue that from a production perspective, the big messages that you can get for understanding this issue is looking at the issue of pulses and oilseeds in India. Those stories tell a lot. It has, with Green Revolution, that these were really crowded out. It moved from north to south, east to west in pulses with some concentration in the center. And it also within the areas, it moved to marginal lands. Edible oil also, India was self-sufficient for some time, and now we almost 55 to 60% of your edible oil comes from import. And there's a compositional change. And there's the other element that you need to understand in India, there's a large footprint, one of the largest footprint of social programs, which PDS, midday meal scheme, ICDS, and all. So there is a very big footprint of social program, which is very distinctive in case of India. So this is what happened in pulses. I said north to south, east to west movement. As Green Revolution came, post-Green Revolution, that Punjab used to grow, which is neither wheat basket or rice bowl of the country. It used to do a lot of pulses as well, but a lot of it just moved to south. So now the point is what we need to do from the policy perspective, because this talk is about policies and programs. So one thing that we always do about is, and what could bring in the supply response to pulses and oilseeds are falling behind. So what we do when they look at the price factors actually do not account for a big supply response, and we'll tell you the reasons. First is that as you move from north to south, then east to west, and then move to marginal areas in production, more than 85% of pulses are grown in India now. They might have improved a little bit, but are actually in rain-fed conditions. So when you're rain-fed conditions, you have greater risk. So from a pricing perspective, what you require is better risk premium. When Arvind Subramanian was in the Ministry of Finance, then we had commissioned a report where we had contributed, and we had suggested that your MSP that you're announcing for pulses, even without procurement, needs to have this risk premium element included in that. And then there are issues of price transmission and so on. So the question is, can MSP work? The minimum support prices, there are two countries which do this, India and Indonesia. Indonesia does it as minimum purchase price. We do it as minimum support price. So for MSP for crops like pulses and oilseeds, the crop deficit reasons. And our argument is that when you are in this world where there are deficit situations, you have to have a very different pricing strategy from a food system perspective than when you have it as surplus, like you have in rice and wheat, where you're sitting on a mountain of stocks. So what happens that if you, in a deficit crop, when the market prices are very high and you are including support prices and they are without procurement, you're just announcing support prices, then it only helps the traders, because it becomes, from a game theory perspective, it becomes an anchor on which they solve the coordination problem, solve the prisoner dilemma problem, and farmers do not get that price. So MSP, we see this, all the prices that farmers were getting is clustered around MSP. This is during that time period when the market prices for tur or pigeon pea was like 220 rupees per kg. MSP was like 47, 48 rupees per kg. And all that traders were offering to farmers were about around MSP, even less than MSP in areas. And this you can see that, these are all, so it's not helping the farmers. So then the question is that, okay, if from the policy side, if the support price is not going to help, could we improve infrastructure? We could improve roads, we could improve market access. Could that help? And then we want to look at, this is a paper that we did with Pratap Vittal and Digvijay Negi and Javeria Hajana. And this is the paper that we wanted to see, could market access help? And and there are a lot of papers that are there. So the idea is that also it becomes far too complex, because we did this with a very elaborate, what is market access in the first place? Market access is every region trades with every other region. So what is market access is not the way traditionally we look at how far you're from the city, how far you're from the roadhead. That's a flawed measure of market access. Market access is looking at the whole network of, this is like, we look at this market access variation across all this within India by looking at this transfer grids where each region can trade with every other region. So this is from a general equilibrium model coming from economics, that you derive the market access measure, and then you can see that market access measure varies. And then we look at the economic mass from the demand side. So we use the nightlight data from satellites to look at that, where is the market side, that, how much of a market potential is there. And for this, what we find is this, that, when market access, and we are not the only ones. I mean, there's another very phenomenal paper that Allen and Atkins have done, which is coming in Econometrica, which actually showed that when market access improves, your road access improves, and your market potential improves. I mean, what it does is actually reduces acreage of pulses and oilseeds. So these are the things, and then you add, on top of it, you add the policy distortion, which is about, with MSP and procurement, which is sporadically happens in pulses and generally doesn't happen in oilseeds, but mostly it happens in rice and wheat. So what you have is an attenuation effect on market access. So whatever the market access would be there on these crops, on top of it, if you add this MSP and procurement for rice and wheat, you have an attenuation effect. It even leads to less of this. So now I'm just going to conclude by just few moments that, when from the policy side, what you're doing is, and then we have started in the panel discussion when we said that, you probably have this compositional effect in edible oils, and I'm really surprised in some way from a nutrition perspective.
Dr. Roy,
yeah.
2 minutes, please.
Yeah, so we have already got this national mission on edible oil. So this is something that, we're doing on palm oil. I don't know whether, and this should be subject of discussion from an environmental sustainable perspective and from a nutrition perspective, that's the route we want to take. At the same time, now when market access, I'm not going to talk about this. We had another element that, how did the market access by doing the market reform? There was a lot of debate about the farm bill that happened, and now it has been repealed. But then we also had to see that, if you improve market access through this, what will the impact? Bihar, where I come from, that involves you a recipe to look at this, that why did the market reforms in Bihar did not deliver in terms of all this. So these are the things that we say, this is because what has happened is in rice and wheat in particular, there was not only the market reform that was taking place, there were also changes taking place on the procurement system at different places. And Bihar was doing that thing in a comparatively subaltern way or an inferior way. And that's why you even had the farm prices going down. So what needs to be done? So we need to say we need in the context of a larger food system. Could this be done through the PDS, the social program, which I said, which is a lot big footprint in India? Now, the footprint that if you know a lot of one is this changes in the food environment where you have you're moving from food deserts to what we call as a nutrient desert. You know, when I'm in the field work, you always get access to Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all Lay's chips, but you do not get access to fruits and vegetables as much and on animal source food. And the one is that, and then if you include, and this we also did in Pune, this is in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, where we look at food environment and then the diets and what are the effect on nutritional outcomes. And so last bit that we said that even if you go into the PDS, you know, you introduce, a lot of states introduce pulses in the PDS and trying to address the falling consumption of pulses. But the idea is that, you know, the food system perspective, pulses remain deficit. So you can only provide what the economists call as infra-marginal units. If your demand is for 5 kg, you're going to supply only 1 kg of pulses. So what it does, what we studied, and that's the paper that we have in the American Journal of Agricultural Economics that you can see, which is also saying that, you know, what the consumers are doing, they're reducing their consumption from the market by 1 kg, get it from PDS, and the overall consumption remains same. This is, I'm not going to get into this. This is another study that we did, which is published in Nutrients, where we look at the landscape of snack consumption, because I said that is one big stylized fact in India's food system. So this is where I'll just conclude and say, so these are all the things. And when you come from there, so this is where we showed that even if you go into the PDS and if you do,
Roy, thank you very much.
And
Dr.
so I'll
Roy, we are extending your time. Dr. Roy, yeah, is that fine?
Yeah, so sure.
Okay, so Dr. Devish Roy from India, thanks for this presentation. Grateful to you for this. We move on to the next presentation, the last one by Dr. Janaki Boone, Sri Lanka, former head senior deputy director for technology section, Ministry of Science and Technology, Sri Lanka, speaking on a look at nutrition through intra-familial food consumption. Dr. Boone, please, about 12 minutes. Dr. Boone, please.
Yes, I think mine would be less than 12 minutes. Let me see how. Okay, so
we have time for discussions. So kindly highlight the points.
Very much, yes. Actually, I made it short because we have a power cut, so I have to beat the power cut. Look at nutritional through intrafamilial food consumption. My presentation will talk on the issues, the ecosystem of interfamilial food consumption, and the challenge we have ahead. So when we talk of the issues, the first one is within the family, the need versus contribution. When we talk of need, we are talking of the life cycle approach, in which a higher proportion of the, am I not seeing the slide? Let me close this. Okay. So what really happens is the need versus in the life cycle approach, a high proportion of the household food is allocated to the one who needs it. For example, the growing child will need more food. The pregnant and the lactating mother will also require added calories and proteins and more other foods. So this is the intra-food distribution in the household is based on the need rule. But in Southeast Asia, like what I have read in most of the countries, the contribution rule plays a role where a great amount of quantity and quality is allocated to those with high economic value. For example, the father or the male who's earning the money for the house is being given an extra share of the food. So this is what we call as the contribution rule. So with that, if you look at the issue, the second issue, the gender bias for food allocation of children. In fact, my presentation today is based on number of review papers and some individual papers. The data is from them, those papers. When we talk of gender bias, food allocation for children, Bangladesh has reported that energy and protein intake per child body weight was about 20% higher for boys than girls among the children 1 to 4 years old. Now that's, there is discrimination, there is gender bias. And then a study from Nepal found there were no gender differences in energy adequacy until the age of 10, but thereafter, the girls fared a worse scenario where the mean energy adequacies for adult girls was approximately 16%, I think, lower than 12 to 16% than than the boys. The issue 3 of gender biased food consumption for adults, again, this is highly variable. In Bangladesh, 2 studies, they have shown that the energy intake of adult men were 25 to 38% high in the 2 regions. Just in 2 regions, I'm just trying to highlight the variation within a country itself. But in the second study, it has shown that the energy intake was adequate for women up to 95% and in men 101%. Now, what is interesting here is they have considered the energy intake and the basic metabolic rate. So, which is very fair, and therefore, this study is pretty valid. So, there is a variability among even the regions when it comes to gender bias in food consumption in adults. In Nepal, women certainly had less energy adequacy than men, and it was even more greater for the micronutrients. Interestingly, in India, the pregnant mothers received on average 84% of the recommended daily allowance, while lactating women received 68% of the RDA as compared to men-headed households who received 90% of their RDA. So there is a kind of a gender need basis. There is a gender bias for adults too. The issue 4 is on food security, and that's the seasonal variation and stress situation. I think I don't need. Sri Lanka has a huge problem of the climate change issues with extreme weather conditions, which has disrupted the food production, food security, and livelihoods of many people. So what we really require is a holistic approach that we can address the climate resilience and the entire food system while also addressing the nutritional concerns of the people. So here, climate smart agriculture needs to be worked on all dimensions if we want to improve the food security. So the seasonal variation is also variable, as I said, based on it's based on the climate conditions, because if it is irrigated land, then certainly it will have an effect. Issue 5 is what I really want to share with you. Interestingly, this data is really new. Poverty in Sri Lanka was previously just on the headcount ratio, and which says that, poverty in Sri Lanka is 4 to 6%. And it has, so therefore we could never relate it to the nutritional issues in Sri Lanka. But now the Department of Census and Statistics have gone into multidimensional indicators where they are looking at the dimensions of education, health, and standards of living for the adults, and then for the children, they're having a fourth dimension of child development included. Now the result is among the children 1 to 4 years, 4 out of 10 children are poor. It's shocking, but it is so. 42%, or that is 42% of the children are poor, multidimensionally poor. Then out of that, when you add in, this is only if you take the adult three factors, but if you take in the fourth factor, then it says that 33.4% of the child population are poor. So this is fantastic news for us, because we could never explain why malnutrition in Sri Lanka for the last, this is only, I have shown only 10 years, but it is pretty bad. And if to give you a little bit of the statistics, children under 5 years, 17% are stunted. Children under 5 years, 20% are underweight, and 15.7% are wasted. So, and it has, we could never find the reason, but now it is very obvious that we have to look at the multidimensional poverty to understand the real reason of malnutrition in Sri Lanka. Added to that, I want to also bring up these low birth weight babies. For nearly 20 years, we are at the figures as 16.6 and 15.7, which is pretty bad. Again, it is the poverty that has played a role, which we never understood for so long. And then if you look at the stunting and the wasting and overweight and obese, you can see with the increase in age, the different grades in the child, the obese and overweight is increasing. But with that, the stunting and wasting remains the same, but with these ratios being divided, you find that. So it's very unfortunate that the children just grow, stunted and wasted children just grow in the society. So interestingly, the relationship between poverty and nutrition has been shown here, which corresponds very well with the undernourished children of nearly 1/3 of the population. And you can see 33.4% of the children are poor, under taking into consideration all the dimensions. The only good thing about Sri Lanka is it's little different, because there is no differences in gender. All girls and boys, whether from the same family, they are being given the same type of food and access to all the facilities. So there's no gender difference. I also want to point out that mother's education and child nutrition status also has a very good result here. If there's no education, you can see the stunting, wasting, and undernutrition at very high levels. And when it goes to degree levels, it is below here. But this may be also the poverty playing a factor here, even if it is mothers. It's an interactive thing. And this is what I just put in this, made this slide to show that the ecosystem of the family food consumption or the food allocation is based on two major issues: the food security, availability, and stability utilization, and the multidimensional poverty in which this family lies in the system. And of course, all other social norms like behavior, gender, education, economic concerns like work-related, household wealth, cultural and religious, food behavior, gender bias, all these are just, based after the food security and multi-dimensional poverty. So the challenge, this is my last slide. So the challenge we have is more research is required in these areas. We cannot generalize to Southeast Asia any of the findings. We can only just compare. We cannot generalize in nutritional programs. So for sustainable nutritional interventions, the most important thing is to search for the influencing determinants in that particular society. for improving the nutrition society, overcoming poverty through women's employment? What is the most influence it determines? The focusing on mothers' education, nutrition knowledge, and what can bring about a change in the interfamilial level and society. So these are the references of which I have taken my. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, madam, for keeping the time also. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Now we are through all the presentations, 7 presentations from Mauritius, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, India, Myanmar. So all of them we have completed. Now the presentations are open for discussion, comments, your remarks. Any of our participants or colleagues can make their comments now. Any remarks, suggestions, questions?
The same as before. I've also uploaded slides with the questions that we've received, so I can share that if none of the panelists have any remarks right now.
I would like to actually ask Dr. Roy, you brought up this point about palm oil and, in India, you're going in for a larger scale production. And then you also brought in the environmental factor. But is there really an issue on that?
Yes, that's no. I was, more my focus was on from the nutrition perspective, right?
Okay.
But and the environment one, I said that environment, at least in Indonesia, Malaysia, where the big palm oil is there is the environmental footprints are very clear, right? Because it has worked through deforestation.
Yes.
Right? So I said that this one is for exploration when it comes to India, right? And how these things, the extra land will come in and or the land will be applied to palm oil. But my more focus, but one thing which is very clear is that it is not the healthiest of oil, right?
Correct,
it is
correct.
Something.
Yes.
So this is something on the nutrition side that that thing is pretty straightforward, right? That,
yes, actually, if the industry has to grow, you need the palm oil. I am very much with coconut oil, but you cannot use coconut oil in any of the food products. You see, there are special properties of palm oil. So that is.
No, I totally agree that, Derek Barley, who is actually the chair of IFPRI, he has this, one of the courses that I am teaching at Georgetown, he used to teach before. One of his slides were about big staples like maize, rice, wheat, and say these are the most progressive crop, this and that. And then he had a slide which said most hated crop, and that was palm oil in the world. And my point was always to him that it might be hated for you or me, or I don't know for anyone else, like from that perspective. But for the processing sector, the food services sector, and even Sri Lanka, which had so much of, I've worked with a lot of my colleagues at University of Peradeniya in Sri Lanka, and we are looking at it. Even there, the composition effect is very much there. Now, the palm oil will also be mixed with coconut oil, right? It's blended in everywhere in the world. So what happened to pulses in India was yellow pea was coming from Canada, was mixed with all different pulses because pulses are expensive. So we used to say yellow pea is the palm oil of pulses, because that's what palm oil is doing. In India also up to 12% you can blend it, and you could still keep the composition and call it sunflower oil or coconut oil or whichever way it is. So the economics of it is very clear. Ethiopia in its document says that we are not allowing palm oil import, but you go to the data and you see palm oil import is coming left, right, and center. So economics is very clear. I totally agree with you that economics of it is just you cannot survive without with saying no to palm oil.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. Any other comments, questions, remarks? Okay, so thank you very much. In that case, we'd like to say how grateful we are to all the,
Sorry. I was just saying that we have received a few questions. So if we have time for that, maybe I can share my slides for the questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. This is the first question. I'll read it out. How can a country's population be involved in the planning and implementation of interventions intended to strengthen food systems?
Thank you. Any of the panelists would like to take this question?
So can I, Professor Ayyappan,
please.
can I?
Yeah, please.
So,
but
this
quick
is
answers. Quick answers, short answers.
Yeah,
please.
I think this is one of the things that we have also worked on is just, and that is what will be the prescription here, that most of the times when we design the program, we do not think about the demand side, that what do the beneficiaries accept, what do they want, what is, like for instance, if you look at the PBS system in India, we say we introduce, like Odisha has introduced coarse cereal, bajra, pearl millet, or states introduce pulses, they try to introduce cash system for delivery. So for involvement of population, the first step that we should have involved is to get the demand assessment in our public programs. We always just, it's a supply driven, someone sitting in the bureaucracy does it. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Gunaratne. Dr. Gunaratne. Dr. Gunaratne, you want to say something on this? Okay, thank you. Next question. Next question, Dr. Gargi.
How do we?
Next question is sorry. Yes, Janaki, ma'am, go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay, so the next question, which I personally find very interesting, is how can we ensure political will to strengthen food systems?
Thank you. Any of the speakers would like to reply to this? Okay, any of the speakers? Okay, so thank you. And you are aware, I don't know who has asked this question. We are aware, the whole thing, when we look at the strategy and the policy, financial supports, institutional support, all these have to come from the governments, from the governments and the political will. And that's obvious. Thank you very much. Next one. Any other question? Okay. What is the role of the private sector actors in strengthening food systems? Any comments from our panelists, speakers would like to take this question?
So, Dr. Ayyappan, just very quickly that
please, Dr. Devish Roy.
So when we take on a food system perspective, what we are truly talking about is the most policy, but also the food environment. So I mean, what I was presenting, if you look at the whole idea of changing composition in edible oil or in the processed food consumption, the private sector has to play a very significant role. And even in changing the composition in production, remote pulses or different types of edible oil. So, and the point is that we have to. The reason that we have so many problems that we are too much dependent on government to take care of so many things, right? The private sector, now if you look at fortification arrangement in that is there now, that from the government side, government has made it mandatory in India that all public programs will have fortification. But for the private sector, it is still very prescriptive that you might do and you might not do, right? So unless the private sector, gets into it, and then we solve this market access problem. So this is what the role of private sector is both complementary as well as supplementary, I would say, when it comes to strengthening the food system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next question, Dr. Gargi.
I think Dr. Janaki had a point to which she had her hand raised.
Dr. Janaki and Dr. Gunaratne.
Yes, what I really wanted to say is, from Sri Lanka point of view, private sector plays a major role. We sign contracts, the private sector signs contracts with the farmers, and they have already found their market. So during actually the COVID time also, this played a huge, it will strengthen the farmers' economy because there was a ready buyer. So I think the private sector has a huge role to play in the food systems. And also, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, Dr.
I'm so sorry, but like Dr. Sunita has also raised her hand, so I don't want to miss out on this panelist.
Dr. Gargi, any more questions?
Yes, sir, there is a question, but Dr. Sunita wants to reply to this question as well.
Okay. Any other question?
Chair, can I say a few words?
No, but we need quick interventions. Dr. Sunita Facknath, please. Dr. Sunita.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll make it very quick. I'm agreeable to what the others are saying. I think the private sector does have a very important role to play, but it can be both positive and negative. They do have a definitely positive role to play in many ways in ensuring food security and so on. But when you look at the nutritional aspect of food security, food and nutrition security, there the private sector really needs to change its act, because they are the ones, through the very strong marketing, the glamorous marketing and so on, they tend to direct people towards less nutritious food. And this has been discussed during this session many times, so I won't repeat that. So I would say that they have both a positive and a negative role to play, and we need to be aware of that.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Gunaratne.
Sorry, no, I think there's a problem. I was not going to answer that.
Okay, fine, thank you. Next, another question is with regard to a common concern in the region is the migration of people from rural areas. So considering that the opportunity in the cities and for obvious reasons, is it possible to convince people from rural areas to continue living in villages and engage in agriculture? What's the scope to increase secondary activities in rural areas? I would take this question. Thank you very much. Yeah, now we are working on, all of us are working towards this. In fact, the COVID gave a kind of a different scenario where the youth came back from cities to rural areas for the issues that they were in the cities. Now they were looking for gainful opportunities. As long as we could generate that kind of an income that they were able to get in the cities, in the urban areas, they were in fact attracted to rural areas for many other reasons, for the kind of weather, for the kind of decongested living and so on. So now we are trying to convert that into some schemes where we can attract and retain youth in agriculture. That's happening in India. So the only thing is greater skills have to be given to the youth, and also, as you have mentioned, secondary agriculture, moving from production agriculture to secondary agriculture, post-harvest, value addition, and then this kind of things came up. And we see a small number of people who came back from cities are staying back in villages. So these models are being captured, and then they're trying to be scaled up. Thank you. Next one. Next question.
That's the end of the question, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, at this time, any of our speakers, esteemed speakers, do you have anything? Short, quick messages? Do you have anything at this stage? Dr. Sunita Facknath? Dr. Sunita?
Yes, Chair. I was just unmuting myself. Yes, I think we have had a very interesting session, and we've looked at a number of issues, both from large countries like India, from small countries like Bhutan and Mauritius. And I think we have the answers. We know what needs to be done. We know first of all, we know the problems. We know the challenges ahead. We even know what to do. It is all a question of actually implementing it on the ground, enforcing what needs to be enforced, encouraging what needs to be encouraged, getting the consumers and the producers all together at the same table. So we know what to do. It's just now getting the right will, the sufficient will and the resources to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, madam. Thank you. Dr. Wickramaarachchi?
Yes, okay. From my side, no, nothing.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Pen Lama? Any take-home message?
I think everyone else has said a lot. I just would like to maybe echo that, I think a lot of solutions, the problems and the solutions are pretty clear. And for a small country like Bhutan, I think we need sort of the bigger countries, in the region, and I think that's India for us, to also take the lead. Because I think for Bhutan, it had one of the biggest challenge has been we just don't have enough, strength as a population or scale as production to really make a big impact. So for small countries, I think it's important to have regional cooperation for food systems to be sustainable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe Dr. Prajal Pradhan has left for another meeting. Dr. Ohnmar, Myanmar.
Oh, yes, thank you. I think I have a very similar idea that the panelists already mentioned, that I think it will be really great to take a lead from India, that for regional cooperation, that to help and coordinate about this sustainable and inclusive food system. Something to work together, and then I think we can voice out this kind of thing and give the message to the regional governance, so government's body, so that this will be that something coordinated collective action for our group, and so this will be the good for the future collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Devish Roy.
Not so much of a comment. I just wanted to make a remark to Dr. Sunita. The first research paper that I wrote was on Mauritius, and the title of the paper was "Who Can Explain the Mauritian Miracle? Mead, Romer, Sachs, or Rodriguez?" So Mauritius actually proved not one but two Nobel laureates wrong, James Mead and V.S. Naipaul. So I just want to say, what is the, think about some really important food system innovation that will come from Mauritius because of all the innovation that Mauritius had delivered over time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. Thank you. That's we appreciate it.
Thank you. Dr. Janaki Boone. Dr. Boone.
Yes, Dr. Firstly, I must thank India for sending us the food, because I don't know how many of you are aware that we are almost bankrupt. So all our food comes from India right now, and also our petrol and so on. Thank you very much. And today I would say this regional cooperation and lots of ideas were shared. And I wish we can have, look at this. It will be uploaded so that we can go through it carefully. So thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. So this brings us to the close of all the presentations and discussions. I won't take much time, except to say that how grateful we are to the organizers as well as the esteemed speakers who have been with us for the last almost 3.5 to 4 hours. And the canvas, all the 6 countries that we went through, largely it's rain-fed, smallholder, and then the cereal-based systems, largely. And then so here comes the need for definitely the food security, self-reliance. At the same time, the regional cooperation that was emphasized time and again, mutually complementing, and then that kind of a for sustainable farming across the region is what is required. So at this time, we are looking for a lot of diversification, a lot of integration of farming systems. It's not just 1 or 2 or 3 crops. It's also, as I said in the beginning, all kinds of food production systems, both terrestrial and aquatic. That's what we look for. We also look for secondary agriculture in order that that we have this kind of a health and nutrition brought in with our food production systems. We also need to look at that kind of secondary agriculture in terms of value addition, in terms of whatever that kind of blending, all that could happen. So that secondary agriculture dimension has to be brought in greater measures. The new technologies, I think, of course, innovations were spoken of, farmers' innovations. At the same time, the new technologies coming from IT could be, ICTs could be deployed in much larger measures across the region in farming. So I think all this would definitely could make our farming smart from seed to market, and ensuring both the production, food production, as well as farmers' income. That's what we are looking for, holistic farming. And this session has been extremely fruitful. To each one of you, grateful, and thanks for the excellent presentations and insights that you brought from different locations that you are in. So it's my privilege to thank each one of you and thank the organizers, and over to Dr. Gargi for her words. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Ayyappan, for chairing this session. And I would also like to thank all the speakers. And I'm sure all the attendees have gained a lot of knowledge from your insightful presentations. I can successfully say it was a really good session. And now I would also like to invite you all to the next session that we have in our webinar series. Yes, the next session we are going to have is on 25th April, called Fortifying Health in South Asia, a focus on nutrition, coastal risk and urban heat. I would also like to invite you all to the opening, to the closing, that's on 29th April, and the webinar highlights will be presented there. Thank you.
So thank you, goodbye, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.